Dramas of the courts. The law awards and the law punishes. Presenting true-life jury trials. Stories in fictionized form typical of the unfolding human dramas of the courts. Tonight, the clue of the silver locket. This is a moment I hate. Standing in a courtroom waiting to tell the story that'll send a person to their death. This is when I hate being a member of the homicide squad. Why don't I give it up? Maybe it's because I hate murderers more. It's a dirty business, the business of murder, and the killing of Laura London was particularly dirty. When I saw her, she was lying on the floor of her apartment. She was dead. Very dead. She'd been stabbed with a dagger from her own writing desk. I looked at her tumbled blonde hair spread across the carpet and wondered what would happen before the person who'd committed this crime was finally caught. I wondered, would it be difficult or easy? I studied the cigarette lighter I held in my hand. A lighter marked P.H. Left behind by who? A visitor? The murderer? I figured that somewhere in this town, someone was going to do a lot of worrying over that lighter when they realized it had disappeared.
Mary! Where the devil is my cigarette lighter?
Oh, really, Philip, I don't know. You're always losing things.
But, honey, don't you remember? I lent it to you.
And I returned it.
No, you didn't. I'm sure you didn't.
Well, I haven't got it.
I'd hate to lose it. It's the one Frank gave me.
Well, Frank being your oldest friend, there won't be any need to explain just how you are at losing things.
Sure you didn't take it to Mara's last night? And that reminds me. You were darn late getting in. I expected you to be home when I arrived.
Well, we got to talking. Mara has some new curtains and, well, you know how it is.
You got so interested in the curtains, you forgot the lighter?
Oh, darn, your cigarette lighter. You look in the office, you'll find it. Now, you better hurry or you'll be late.
Yeah, I guess so. Mrs. Hudson, have I told you that it's very nice to have you home again after your vacation?
Mr. Hudson, have I told you it's just heaven to be home again? But, darling, I wish you didn't have to work nights so often. I hardly get to see you.
Then hang on to your hat, Angel. To me, no more night work. From now on, you and I are going to spend lots of time together. And just to show you, tomorrow night we'll take in dinner and do a show.
Oh, swell. Just for that, I'll ring Moira right away and see maybe if I did leave that lighter there last night.
Don't worry, it'll turn up someplace.
Philip was right. It did turn up someplace, but not where he expected. I took it with me when I went to see the Hudsons. It hadn't been hard locating its owner. The story was a pretty obvious one. Sick wife takes long sea trip, leaving lonely husband with lovely blonde. I showed Philip Hudson the cigarette lighter. He didn't deny it was his, but he did ask one thing.
I'll tell you everything I know, Inspector, but I'd like to see you alone.
Perhaps Mrs. Hudson would wait in another room.
I'd rather be here. No, Philip, don't look like that. You see, dear, I know all about you and Laura London. Let me stay.
It's okay with me.
Well, I suppose it's all got to come out now that Laura... Now that she's dead. But, Mary, please believe me,
Tell the inspector what he wants to know, Philip. We'll thresh this together out later.
Okay, honey, if that's the way you want it. Well, Inspector, I guess you know something about my friendship with Laura London, so I won't stall. It started after Mary went away. And when she came back... Well, it's hard to cut loose from a girl like Laura. Last night, I went to see her.
After all, Philip, I do expect some attention.
I'm sorry, Laura.
I've hardly seen anything of you lately, and it's only 10 o'clock, and you say you've got to go.
Laura, You know, I've been pretty tied up lately.
Well?
Well, I'm afraid the way things are, I'm going to be even more busy.
I see.
I don't mean I won't be able to see you at all. We can meet for lunch.
Oh, don't worry, Philip, I get it. This is the brush off.
No, Laura, only...
Is it your wife?
Well, yes, it is.
But she came back some time ago. Why did you wait so long?
I thought I could continue.
But your conscience began to worry you. Oh, well, I suppose that's how it's got to be.
Laura, you always said you realized it couldn't last.
I guess a woman just hopes. Especially when she's in love.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Just let's call it a day.
Laura, the locket. Could I have it back?
My locket? Oh, no, Philip, I like it. I want it.
But the photograph and inscription inside,
You'd feel happier if they didn't exist. Well, don't worry, my sweet. No one has ever seen inside the locket, and no one ever will. Although there's someone who'd very much like to.
The jealous boyfriend, huh? Who is he?
Mind your own business.
All right, all right. But, the locket. Please, Laura.
No, Philip, I won't part with it. I'm very attached to this locket. I wear it a lot.
So I've noticed.
And I'll go on wearing it. And I'll keep the picture inside.
It would be most inconvenient
If anyone saw it, no one shall.
Laura, please. I wish you'd return it.
No, it's mine, and I intend to keep it. No one is going to get this locket away from me.
Then I suppose there's nothing more to be said.
Nothing.
Maybe I'll see you sometime.
Maybe.
Well, thanks for everything. Goodbye, Laura. And then I left.
What time?
Oh, shortly after 10.
Time of death estimated between 10:30 and 1 o'clock. Could have been a bit earlier.
What are you suggesting, Inspector?
I'm thinking that Laura London didn't seem the type to be brushed off so easily.
You mean you think that I killed her?
Well, she might have threatened to tell your wife, and you might have...
No, Inspector. It wasn't like that at all. I tell you, there was no quarrel between Laura and I.
Maybe not. I think you'd better come down to the station with me.
You're not going to arrest him, are you?
Depends on how he answers our questions.
Now, don't worry, darling. It'll be all right. You ring Frank. Ask him to come to the station, will you? I suppose that's all right, Inspector. Frank Moore is my lawyer.
That's okay. Get him along. I have a feeling you're going to need him. Well, if you're ready.
You're making a mistake, Inspector.
What do you mean, Mrs. Hudson?
Philip didn't murder that woman.
He'll be given every opportunity to prove it.
Mary, darling, you get some rest. I'll be back very soon. You'll see.
But you're not leaving here. You don't have to.
Look, it's just to answer some questions. I'll clear everything up.
I can clear everything up right now.
What are you trying to say, Mrs. Hudson?
This Laura London was alive at 11:30 last night.
Mary?
How do you know?
I saw her. I spoke to her.
But I didn't know you knew her. You'd never seen her.
How did you come to see her last night?
I had just arrived home. As I came in, the telephone was ringing. Hello?
Is that Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
My name is Laura London. I must see you urgently. Can you come round to 202 Swansea Court right away?
Who are you? What do you want?
I'd hurry if I were you, Mrs. Hudson. This concerns your husband.
Philip? Oh, what's wrong? Is he hurt? Is it... Hello? Hello? She had hung up. I was afraid something had happened to Philip. I rushed out, caught a taxi, and went around to her apartment.
So that's why she took it so calmly. She must have rung almost as soon as I left.
Go on, Mrs. Hudson. What happened when you got there?
She started to tell me. Well, she told me all about her and Philip. She said,
Philip and I love each other. We've been in love for months.
"Is that why you sent for me at this hour of the night? To tell me that?"
I thought it was time you were told. All these nights when you thought he was working, he's been seeing me. So now you know.
Yes. Now I know. And what do you expect me to do about it?
You left him once.
I had to. I'd been very ill. I had to take a long holiday.
Leave him again. But this time, don't come back.
Miss London, did you see Philip tonight?
See Philip? Why, yes, I did.
Am I right in supposing he broke off your friendship?
What if he did? It was only because of you.
Then surely you wouldn't want him back under such circumstances.
He's giving me up, but not because he wants to. You're holding him, Mrs. Hudson, only through a misplaced sense of loyalty he has for you.
I don't believe that. Philip's a free agent. I don't hold anything over him.
Oh, yes, you do. That's the trouble with a woman like you. So far as you're concerned, the whole world consists of a kitchen with chintz curtains and nice chats by the fireside. You're just stifling any ambition in Philip with that sort of existence.
Philip was always very contented with the life we led. Frankly, I don't blame him being attracted by you. But I'm back. And so far as he's concerned, it's over. And you'd be wise to accept that fact.
You're very subtle, aren't you, Mrs. Hudson? The understanding little wife who forgives her husband all.
I don't look at it like that. You were something new to Philip. Something exciting and glamorous. But fundamentally, my husband is rather inclined to the kitchen with chintz curtains and quiet fireside chats. And believe me, he's not quite so corny as you make it sound. I advise you to try it sometime with a man of your own. Frankly, I see no reason to continue this discussion. So if you don't mind, I'll go now.
You think you'll get him back, but you won't. I know what will happen when you tell him you found out.
Don't worry, Miss London. I'm not playing into your hands. I'm saying nothing at the moment. I feel sure that Philip will tell me all about it in his own good time. Now, good night. I left then. That was about 11:30 or a little later.
Mary, I was going to tell you. I'm so sorry about it.
It's all over now, Philip. Maybe it was just as well I did see her.
You left about 11:30, you say?
I can vouch for that, Inspector. It was almost 12 when Mary got in, and it's just about 15 minutes from Laura's to here.
So you see, Philip couldn't have killed her. She was alive after he was home and in bed.
No, it seems he couldn't.
Then there's no necessity to take him away.
No. But I'm afraid,
What is it?
I'm afraid, Mrs. Hudson, you'll have to come with me. Your story proves that your husband couldn't have done this thing. But you could.
We will continue the clue of the silver locket in just a moment. But first, your announcer. And now we continue the clue of the silver locket.
Mary Hudson was arrested for the murder of Laura London. Seems like in her anxiety to save her husband, she hadn't thought of herself. We checked her story. The taxi driver and the night porter had both seen her. She had visited Laura's apartment at the time she said. The murder could have been committed by a woman, although Mrs. Hudson didn't look the type who'd lose her temper to that extent. The Laura London killing hadn't been pretty. Well, I've been in this game long enough to know that you just can't tell. It was a while before the locket was mentioned. It seems that Philip Hudson spoke about it first to Frank Moore.
It's that locket, Frank.
Locket? What about the locket?
It's missing.
What do you mean?
I gave Laura a locket, a silver one. You know those big old-fashioned things you put photographs in?
Funny present to give a girl these days.
Well, she liked it. She was wearing it when I left her. And Mary says she still had it on when she saw it.
Well?
But from what I can gather, she didn't have it on when she was found.
Well, she'd probably taken it off and put it away somewhere.
I don't know. I've got a feeling that somehow that locket is tied up with a murder.
You think she was killed for the locket?
Maybe.
That's ridiculous. Nothing else was touched, and she had a considerable amount of jewelry.
I know. But I've been thinking...
Look, if you can think of anything that'll help me to get Mary out of this mess, for heaven's sake, tell me.
And Laura was very secretive. She never told me much about herself, but one thing I do know, there was another man.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. He was very attractive.
Yeah, but this one was crazy about her. She used to laugh about him.
Laugh?
She said he was very interested in the locket. I gather she wanted to keep it, just so she could make the poor devil miserable. Apparently, he was very jealous.
I see.
But do you? Don't you realize that he might have murdered her? Killed her and taken the locket?
Have you any idea who he was, his name or his business?
None at all.
Or what he looked like?
No.
Well, I don't see how it can help. It's all only surmise anyway. You better forget about it.
And your lawyer told you to forget it?
But, Inspector, I can't. Mary and I are both sure she was wearing it. Yet when you searched the apartment, you couldn't find it.
That's so. We haven't found it.
Well, doesn't that prove that someone else was in the apartment? Someone who came in after Mary left?
Actually, it proves nothing. If your stories are true, and it's my business to doubt all stories, it certainly does seem that some third person may have been there. On the other hand,
Yes?
Your wife might have taken it. You see, Mr. Hudson, she might have been trying to protect you.
But she didn't know it had my photograph in it. No one knew. And Mary didn't kill Laura. I know she didn't. No, Inspector, I'm going to find that locket. If it's the last thing I do. Mary, darling, how are you?
I'm all right, Philip. Really, I am. Hello, Frank.
Hello, Mary. I've come to go over the details of your defense.
Oh, Frank, must we? We've been over and over it all so often.
Mary, don't you see? The more times you go over it, the more likely you are to think of some little thing which might help.
Your trial comes up day after tomorrow. I must go through your statement with you.
I suppose you must. All right, then.
Darling, the locket. You're sure Laura was wearing it?
Quite sure.
Look, Phil, I thought we decided to forget
I'm not
that.
going to forget it. I'm convinced that someone has it. And that someone is the murderer. I told the inspector
You
that.
what? You spoke to the inspector about it?
Yeah, why not?
You fool. You're only making things worse for Mary.
I don't agree. And I must say, Frank...
If the contents of that locket are made known, it'll be more evidence against Mary. Not only the photograph, but the inscription on the back.
Inscription? What inscription?
What do you know about the photograph and what's written on the back of it?
Why, you told me.
Did I?
Of course you did. How else could I know?
You're quite sure of what you're saying, Mr. Hudson?
Quite sure. Neither my wife nor I have ever mentioned the photograph or the inscription to him.
You're suggesting that he has the locket.
I know he has it. He was the jealous boyfriend. I know that Frank Moore murdered Laura London.
But there's no evidence. Nothing that points to him at all.
He could have got into the apartments through the back way, or while the porter was having supper. Inspector, you must do something now at once, before the trial starts.
Wait a minute. We can't do anything with suppositions. Now, get a couple of men and put them on the job. Maybe we can unearth something. But we could find nothing. Nothing that implicated Frank Moore. True, it was possible for him to have sneaked out from his own apartment, got into the London apartment, committed the murder, and got away. But there was no evidence. Mary Hudson came up for trial, and things certainly looked black for her. There were people who said her lawyers weren't trying. But anyway, the case against her was too strong. When the jury retired for the night, we all knew what the verdict would be. It was obvious.
Guilty. That's what they're saying. And she's innocent as hell.
Now, Mr. Hudson, pull yourself together.
They can't send her to the chair. Inspector, you've got to do something.
I've done everything I can, but I can't get any evidence. I haven't questioned Moore. I don't want him to know I suspect him. But if he says he was home in bed, then there's no way to disprove it.
I'm going to see him. I'll force the truth out of
A
him.
confession by force? No, it wouldn't hold water.
But there must be some way.
Mr. Hudson, I'm as anxious as you are to see justice done. That's my job. Maybe there is something we can do.
Anything. Anything you say. I'll do it if it'll help.
Good. I suggest you go and see Moore right away.
You ought to be home in bed, Phil. You look as though you could do with a good sleep.
Sleep? I feel as though I'll never sleep again. I keep seeing Mary as she used to be. And as she looked today in court.
I'm sorry, old man. I did what I could, but the evidence...
I know I'm behaving badly. Maybe if you could fix me a drink, huh?
Sure. I'll just pop out in the kitchen. You like a strong one?
Very strong. Is this a new radio?
Yeah.
Nice model.
What'd you say?
I said it's a nice model.
I can't hear you with the radio going.
Sorry. Just a moment, I'll switch it out.
Well, that's better now. What were you saying?
The radio. It has a nice tone.
Oh, yeah. Not bad. Here.
Thanks. Well, here's look. I've been thinking, Frank. You and I and Mary, we've always been pretty close. When this is over, there'll just be you and I. Mary always liked you. Always said she'd trust you more than anyone she knew.
That's good to hear.
You know, I used to think you were a bit keen on Mary when we were all young, eh?
I always admired her. Maybe I was a little in love with her.
I don't blame you. Remember the time you were ill and she nursed you? Wouldn't hear of you going to a hospital. Sat with you night after night.
Listen, Phil, perhaps it'd be better if we spoke of something else.
No, I've got to talk. And you're the only one I can talk to. Afterwards, when this is over, we'll go up to the cabin, just the two of us. We'll go up there and we'll talk about Mary. We'll stick together, you and I.
No, I'll be pretty busy for a while. A lot of work has
Forget the work. You've always been my friend. You and Mary. Now, with Mary gone...
Oh, stop talking about her as though she were dead.
She's as good as dead, Frank. They're certain to send her to the chair. And she was always so good. So kind to both of us.
We'll appeal. Perhaps things aren't so
There'll
bad.
be no appeal. We've done all we can. Soon, all we'll have left are our memories. She'll be gone.
Oh, stop talking like that.
She shouldn't die, should she, Frank? She always trusted you. I would trust him with my life, that's what she said. And she has, hasn't she? Trusted you with her life. Think of her, Frank. Think how she looked that night years ago when we took her to her first ball. She was wearing...
Shut up, I tell you.
When you see her tomorrow in court, remember all her kindnesses. All her little acts of generosity. It's not right that she should die, is it? Someone else should be in a place, shouldn't he? Answer me, damn you, answer me!
Yes, someone else should be in a place. You.
Me?
I didn't mean it to be Mary. I meant it to be you.
So you admit it at last? You admit killing Laura?
Of course I killed her. She deserved it, always taunting me, waving that damn locket under my nose until I almost went crazy. I murdered her to find out whose picture it was. I knew the other man had seen her that night. I thought he'd get the blame. I didn't know about Mary. I thought they'd blame you.
You wanted to put me in the chair?
I wanted to put the man who took Laura from me in the chair. I wanted it more than ever when I knew it was you. Oh, I've hated you all this time. First you took Mary from me, then Laura. But I'll get even with you yet.
It's Mary who'll suffer most.
Oh, no, it'll be you, because you're going to confess. Tomorrow, before the court resumes, you'll confess. You won't let Mary suffer, and you haven't got anything on me.
Swine out.
You'll do nothing. I covered my tracks too well. No, this is the one time when I win.
What did you do with the locket?
I've got it. Safely hidden. Would you like me to hand it over to the police? Say it was found in your room? Or would you like someone to tip the police off very quietly? No, I think perhaps the confession would be best.
Yes. Confessions always are best, aren't they? There's no denying them. Inspector, you better come out now. Vincent, what are you doing here?
Taking down as nice a little confession as I've heard in a long time.
You...
That's enough. I've got a gun here. You better go quietly.
How did you get in?
I let him in when I turned the radio up, while you were in the kitchen. It was all the inspector's idea. He thought you might crack up. So you see, Frank, this is one time when you don't win.
You can see now why I said this London case was particularly nasty. They've just pronounced sentence of death on Frank Moore. As I look across the court here and see Mary Hudson sitting with her husband, think of what she's been through, how close she came to taking the blame for another man's crime. Well, somehow I don't hate my job so much.
In a moment, I'll return with further news of these real-life dramas of the courts. But first, your announcer.
The court is adjourned.
The judge departs, the jury is discharged. The judgment has been given. Another human story is over until the law of the land is challenged again. And we are privileged to hear once more at this time, dramas of the courts. Dramas of the courts. The law awards and the law punishes. Presenting true life jury trials. Stories in fictionized form typical of the unfolding human dramas of the court. Tonight, the case of the blonde goddess.
Well, the case is over and done with now. The blonde goddess case, the newspapers call it. Because Sonda Baird, the accused, looked that way. Standing in the dock, proud, with her bright hair like the light of a windy cornfield, with all the snows of Norway in her imperious manner, she did indeed look a goddess. I first met her when Ethel Baird, later Mr. District Attorney Baird, brought her back from the war in Europe. He adored her with a tremendous adoration in which there was more pride than worship. She really looked like something out of this world. And she loved him with a deep and, as things turned out, a most dangerous affection. Well, this is how it started. 6 o'clock on a dull, gray New York morning. I wasn't even out of bed. That woke me. So, I answered it.
Greg, this is Ethel Baird. Can you come over to my office right away? It's Sonda. For heaven's sake, come over.
Ethel was slumped in his office chair, drawn and haggard. Quickly, he jerked out the story. He looked awful, because at that time he'd been working night and day practically cleaning up a crime wave that had swept the country.
I've asked the district governor to release me. My stand-in, Benson, is now acting DA. I couldn't arrest her, Craig. I couldn't.
Where is she now?
In the other office with Benson. I want you to take her defense, Greg. Of course she didn't do it. It's fantastic.
Has she said anything?
No. No, not a thing. That's what's so strange. She hasn't said a thing.
Okay, let me get the facts straight. You were advised at 3 o'clock this morning that Alex Branwell, Deputy Governor of New York, had been murdered in his apartment on 43rd Street.
Yes, I dressed and came down here, collected my boys, and we went over it.
Mm-hmm. Alex Branwell had plenty of enemies, didn't he?
He's responsible for this crime cleanup which has been running the insides out of the whole department, including me. You can put the finger on 100 mobsters who'd like to see Branwell bucked.
Well, why's your wife being arrested then?
Because heaven help me for saying it. Everything points to her doing the job.
Well, that was my assignment for my old friend. Prove his wife innocent of killing the Deputy Governor of New York City. A ruthless old martinet who worked every man in his administration to death. Well, I saw Sonder in the interviewing room at the 56th Precinct.
Hello, Greg. You're going to ask me questions? I can tell you only what I have told the police. That I killed the man.
Did you, Sonder? Why?
Do I have to tell you that?
Ethel has engaged me to defend you. He's sick with worry, but he believes you're innocent.
He does not know.
Now, look. As far as I can make out, you've never even met Alex Branwell.
I heard enough about him. All the time it was Branwell, that guy Branwell from Ethel. He was making Ethel work so hard. Why, Dr. Markey said if he did not stop, he would have a breakdown.
Are you telling me that you murdered Branwell just because he was making Ethel work too hard?
Yes.
Oh, Sonder, this is serious. There are features about this case which must be explained. You must give me reasons why you were in the building of Branwell's apartment around about the time he was killed.
Gregory, I can tell you nothing. Much better you leave everything as it is. That is clear, yes? Everything, please, as it is.
61st sitting of the District Court, State of New York, in the matter of the People versus Sonda Helgelong Baird on a subject of murder in the first degree, Chief Judge Gilroy presiding. Court will rise.
The trial proceeded. The acting District Attorney Benson put up his first witness, and I rose to cross-examine Sonda's maid, Nancy. I asked my first question. What time had she seen Sonder leave the house?
It was just after 1:30, sir.
1:30 in the morning. Rather late for you to be up, wasn't it?
I'd been to Greenwich Village with me boyfriend.
You've said that as you came across the rear hall going to the servants' quarters, you saw her, Mrs. Baird, cross to the front door.
Yes, she just come down the stairs.
How did she seem?
Seem?
Yes, was she composed? Was she agitated? Well, how did she seem?
Same as she did usually. Mrs. Baird never seemed to be upset about anything.
Then she appeared to you to be at that time perfectly normal.
Yes. Oh, except that she had a nice dress on under a mink coat. Oh, it looked real swell, too, the lavender satin one. Pretty enough to be an evening dress.
Her nightdress?
Yes. I thought it was a bit queer at the time, of course.
This was the first of the queer clues in that strange trial. In a way, I was playing cards in the dark. Sonder refused to tell me anything but the barest facts. But for Ethel's sake, I had to defend her as best I could, and rely on the prosecution's questions to give me the leads to work on. I faced the elevator boy of the apartment house where Branwell had lived.
Yes, sir. I've been elevator boy there for 4 years.
You knew Mr. Branwell then?
Sure. He and me were pals. Great guy.
Did he know about your police record?
What police record?
Do you deny that your real name is Wilfred Watlow, and you were once in a reform school? Then later on you served 6 months for assault on a police officer? I have the record here if you want to refresh your memory.
Now, that's okay. 10 years ago. I've been going straight ever since.
Your Honor, The state's star witness in this case is a self-confessed criminal. I ask the jury to keep that in mind in assessing the value of his replies under cross-examination. Now, Wilfred Watlow, you say that at about 15 minutes to 2, you showed a woman up in the elevator to the 5th floor where Branwell had his apartment.
That's right.
What was she wearing?
A fur coat, I think.
You think?
Yeah, she did.
You seem uncertain. To test your powers of observation, let me ask you this. Did she have her hands in the pockets of that fur coat?
Pockets? Why, yeah, she did.
Indeed. I tender Exhibit 16, Your Honor, one mink coat, the only fur coat which the accused possesses. It has no pockets whatever. I'd like the jury to examine it. I tender also the digest of the court proceedings in which this witness was concerned before, as a prisoner accused of assaulting a patrol officer. In that evidence, you will read that he denied the crime, but was convicted. That court refused to believe him. As this court must now refuse to believe him when he says he recognizes the accused as the woman he took up in the elevator on the night Branwell was murdered. The State Department is guilty of the grossest contempt in putting this man on the stand to testify when a few inquiries would have shown what he is, a convicted criminal. I urge Your Honor to refuse to accept this witness's evidence.
No.
Order!
He's telling the truth. He did see me that night. I was there.
Sonder, for heaven's sake.
It is useless for anyone to say it is not so.
Sonder! Your Honor, my client is under great stress. I ask for an immediate adjournment. But why, Sonder? Why? I'm trying to disprove their case, yet you in one phrase undo all my work. I can't understand it.
I'm sorry, Greg, but I asked you to leave things as they were.
Do you realize what that will mean? You'll be convicted. You'll get the chair.
Yes, I realize that, Greg. But you see, I killed the man. Why then try to protect me?
Well, then, if you did kill Branwell, at least give me a chance to put up a reasonable defense. Plead accident, insanity, anything.
No, Greg.
But why not? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Because I do not want it that way.
What about Athol? You must consider him, Sonder. He's half out of his mind at the moment.
Where is Athol now?
Well, he was in court. He's coming to see you. I asked him to delay it until I had talked to you. Well, he probably won't give him access, since this is an adjournment only. Sonder, you're hiding something. I don't believe you killed Branwell.
I did.
The gun was yours, certainly. It was found in Branwell's apartment, but I don't think you took it.
You don't know what you are saying. Of course I took it there. He was causing Athol so much worry. He could not eat, could not sleep. Always he is at the district attorney's office, working. So I cannot stand it anymore. I take the gun, go to the apartment, and I shoot Mr. Branwell. That is all there is to it. As to hiding anything, what have I to hide? Nothing. I speak the truth, and you will not believe me.
All right, Sonder. Let's leave it at that. Court will be resumed presently. I've done all I can to make you change your attitude. I'll see you later. Thanks, Warden.
Greg, I thought you were never coming out. How is she?
She says she killed Branwell.
But that's nonsense. She never met Branwell.
I thought I had it. The reason why she's behaving like this. Now, I'm not so sure.
What do you mean? Greg, if you've something on your mind...
I have. But you're not going to be happy about it.
What is it? This isn't the time to pull punches.
Well, I thought she was protecting someone.
Protecting someone? Who?
Well, I said this might hurt. Is she interested in anyone besides you, Athol?
You're crazy.
Well, it's the only alternative, Athol. That someone else is in this. Someone that she's protecting. If you say there's no one and couldn't possibly be anyone, then I'll have to accept her confession as being true. That she is a murderess. In view of her attitude, I'll have to resign from the case.
What could it be? been as happy together as it's possible for any two people to be. I'm sure there's no one that couldn't be great. They just couldn't, not my son.
Well, you might know.
That's true. I mightn't. Don't give up, Greg. If I needed anyone now, I need you around.
Talk resumed. All those having business therein now attend. Talk resumed.
This is it, Greg. I don't know what it's all about, but you're the only one who could save her.
I'll do my best, Athol. Now, let's go in. But it's the first time I've ever defended a confessed murderess who didn't care what the jury thought.
We'll continue our story in just a moment. But first, our announcer. And now we continue. The case of the blonde goddess.
Outside St. Balfour Jail, the traffic runs by. And the newsboys are crying the latest news of the trial.
X-ray, read all about it. Blonde goddess declares guilt. 5th day of blonde goddess trial. Read all about it. X-ray.
And every newsstand carried flaring posters. The fact that she was the wife of the district attorney was not overlooked. As if those newsboys overlooked anything. I opened my briefcase as they brought Sonder in.
In here.
Thank you. Hello, Greg. I did not expect you today. I thought that Athol would come.
Athol's not well. I persuaded him to get Dr. Marquis to come around.
He is sick? Oh, what is the matter? Tell me, Greg.
No, nothing to worry about. It's just all this business, the trial, the publicity.
Nothing more. You're telling me the truth.
Of course. Why shouldn't I?
Oh, dear Athol. He is not strong. All this work he has had to do.
I didn't think you cared a great deal what Athol thought about anything.
Care? What would you know how I care for him? He is everything to me.
You love him?
Of course.
Sonder, if you're sent to the chair, that will be the end of Athol. Do you understand that?
He will never get over it.
He won't. Athol's a keenly sensitive man, and he loves you.
Did he tell you that?
Yes. I said I thought you must be shielding another man.
Oh.
He wouldn't believe it. He refused to. You're everything to him. And unless I can save you, life won't be worth a cent to him. I warn you, Sonder. That's what'll happen.
Oh, please.
Dr. Marquis told me he's just that much off a complete nervous collapse. The second you're sentenced, we'll send it off. You might just as well condemn him with yourself.
Oh, no. You're saying this to confuse me.
If you want to wreck Athol's life, in effect kill every decent instinct he values, then this is the way to do it.
Stop it, Greg, for love of heaven. I love him. I do nothing to hurt him. I can't listen to what you say.
You can't stand to hear it. But you know it'll happen.
How do I know?
Everything points to it. When you let him down, everything in life is finished for him.
I see. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm always ashamed when I lose control. What is it that you want me to do?
Let me put you on the stand tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, no.
It's the only way.
But that man, the one who is so ruthless...
Bennett, you'll have to submit to his cross-examination. I'm not going to ask you again if you murdered Brenwell. But you'll be on oath tomorrow. All I want you to do is protest your innocence. A strong denial from you and support in my address may turn the scale.
And if it does not?
We can't even consider the other side of it. Now sit down. Let's go over things. Now, this is the line my questioning is going to take. I planned everything with her, but at the back of my mind there was uncertainty. Only I knew just how slim her chances were, slim to the point of extinction. The 6th day began. The courtroom was packed. There were even more press boys than before. The imagination of a country was roused before this dominating spectacle of a beautiful woman on trial for her life. You could have heard a pin drop when the clerk echoed my own order.
Call Sonder Helgelong Bird.
killed Alexander Bramwell?
No. I mean, yes, I swear.
You admit that this is your gun given to you by your husband?
Yes.
You have no explanation for its being found in Bramwell's apartment?
No.
You did not take it there?
No.
You did not fire the shot?
No.
You did not kill him?
No.
Then do you know who did? Answer! Do you know who did?
No,
Your Honor, the witness has collapsed.
The court adjourned for 20 minutes.
I pushed my way through the excited crowd around the doors. And as I did so, another of those odd happenings with which this case was crowded jumped up in front of me like a jack-in-the-box.
Mr. Warwick, sir.
It was the maid, Nancy Holmes.
I must speak to you, Mr. Warwick. I've something on my mind. I don't know quite if it means anything, but I thought I'd better tell you.
Well, about what? I'm in a hurry to get Mrs. Baird.
It's about Mrs. Baird. I think it's got something to do with the murder.
Court is convened. His Honor, Judge Gilroy presiding.
Your Honor, I ask the indulgence of the court for a short statement of considerable importance. I wish to apply for an adjournment of this investigation until tomorrow morning.
But there has just been an adjournment, Counselor.
I'm aware of that, Your Honor, but evidence has just been given to me which materially alters my client's defense. It is evidence of so important a character that I ask for time to study it. If I could see Your Honor and the Deputy District Attorney in chambers, I could explain, but, well, I trust that will not be necessary and that an adjournment will be granted on my guarantee of good faith to the court.
Has the prosecution any objection?
No, Your Honor. The people have stated their case.
Very well. Adjournment granted.
As Sonda was led below to the cell, I caught her eye. In her regard was a look of utmost terror mingled with appeal. I knew then that I was on the right track at last. I knew then that my course was clear, that of a lawyer pledged to uphold certain ethics of his calling. I knew I must tell the truth about her, must strip from her the pitiful pretense which she had put forward throughout each day of that formidable trial. That night, I studied the evidence which would be tendered the next day. Evidence of a completely shocking character. The court met again, and the golden sunlight fell full upon Sonda as she stood in the dock. The judge looked down at me. All around, I was conscious of an atmosphere of expectation. One I appreciated, but had no liking to satisfy.
Well, Mr. Warwick.
Order! Order!
Your Honor, I ask that I may call a fresh witness. Myself, Gregory Wilson Warwick.
Well, what do you think of that? There's a new turn of events.
Very well, Counselor. Take the stand.
So I took the stand and told my story. First, I repeated what Nancy had told me, not realizing that she had the key to the whole mystery.
I'd not been sleeping, and last night I heard someone going down the back passage at the house. I looked out. It was Mr. Baird, sir, walking slowly away and out the back door. I called to him, but he didn't answer. Well, I knew he must have heard me, so I dragged on a dressing gown and ran after him. But he was in the street by this and walking on. I grasped his arm and, well, he just stared straight ahead and pushed me aside and went on walking. But his face, it looked horrible, sir. Horrible. With an awful smile.
Such was Nancy's story. So, I asked for the adjournment. And last night, with Dr. Marquis at my elbow, we waited in the hall of my friend's house. I'd already discussed Nancy's story with the doctor. Presently, we saw Athol, just as Nancy had said. And we followed him. Followed him along the silent back streets of New York to Alex Branwell's apartment house. In through the doors, up the stairs, not in the elevator, up to the door of that fatal apartment. And there we saw him go through the motions of firing a gun, then turning and going back the way he had come. All in a sleep. A coma as deep as a hypnotic state.
Why, this is incredible, Mr. Warwick. Have you any supporting evidence?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Marquis. He is a famous psychiatrist. He will testify that Ethel Baird, worn with the strain of work imposed upon him by Alex Branwell, had a mental collapse which manifested itself in a distorted dream in which he saw himself killing Branwell. Somehow, Dr. Marquis can explain it, this subconscious impression became translated into action. Ethel Baird killed Branwell without knowing he did it. His wife played the part we played last night, followed him, and has since tried to protect him by taking blame for the crime herself.
Well, Sonder, I guess you hate me.
No, Greg, I don't hate you. You wanted to get at the truth, and so you did. Will he suffer? Have they arrested him?
They have arrested him, yes. But don't worry, he doesn't know it.
Oh, Greg, he's not...
No, at this present moment, he's at Dr. Marquis's nursing home.
Oh.
Last night, he had a complete collapse. Mind, I warned you, it wasn't here. I'm afraid it'll take many months of patient care to nurse him back to health.
And after that, what will they do? Oh, what will they do, Greg?
Oh, my dear, there'll be a trial, of course, but with the medical evidence available, there's no jury on earth will convict him.
Oh. When can I see him?
Just whenever you want. You're free. But I suggest you make it soon. Otherwise, Dr. Marquis might engage some other special nurse.
The court is adjourned.
The judge departs, the jury is discharged, the judgment has been given. Another human story is over until the law of the land is challenged again, and we are privileged to hear once more at this time, dramas of the courts.
Dramas of the court. We present the dramatic story of our court, where daily the unbiased administration of justice is dealt to rich and poor alike. These dramatizations in fictionized form are typical of the human interest dramas that daily crowd our courts. Tonight, the trial of Harold Warren.
Gentlemen of the jury, the administration of good government is based upon a sound judicial system. In considering the case before you, weigh carefully the evidence and be convinced beyond all reasonable doubt of the guilt or innocence of the accused before delivering your verdict.
The Crown versus Harold Warren.
Cherry Harper was my half-sister. We'd always been friendly without taking a great deal of interest in each other's lives. For I'd lost touch with her after Father's death. She moved into a city flat. Then one night she paid my wife Janet and I a surprise visit. She told us she was going to be married to a Harold Warren. We weren't invited to the registry wedding. Even the witnesses were strangers. Janet was quite upset, and I was puzzled. However, it was her life, and she appeared happy. And one day, about 6 months later, Janet came rushing into my office. She was terribly excited.
Jim, have you seen the Clarion?
No, what's happened?
On the front page, Cherry. Jimmy, she's dead.
What are you talking about? Here, give me that paper.
Oh, Jim, I'm sorry. What can have happened?
Young wife found dead. Poisoning suspected. Mrs. Cherry Warren, aged 20, was found to death. Come on, Janet. We're going down to their flat.
Yes, Jim. Oh, just a minute. Perhaps the stop press has...
Oh, yes. Yes, there is something. Harold Warren, aged 35, alleged by police to have poisoned his wife. He was charged with murder. A month later, Harold Warren, my brother-in-law, faced his trial for the murder of Cherry. I'd come to know him pretty well in that month. He was a big man, handsome, fleshy, cheerful, and almost pathetic in his denials of guilt. At the inquest, he'd wept openly. But I didn't like him. There was something about him I didn't find wholesome. The case against him seemed strong. The Crown prosecutor was a clever man, patient.
In your wife's body, Warren, was found a great deal of antimony. Now, antimony is a deadly poison with certain peculiar properties. One is that it kills life, and yet preserves the flesh intact. Now, was that antimony yours?
Yes.
When did you get it?
I forget, a long time ago.
How long ago?
Years. I bought it from a chemist.
And who was the chemist?
I forget it. It was years ago.
You seem to have a very convenient memory. Tell me, why did you buy it?
I used to experiment. Chemistry was a hobby.
I see. Did your wife know you had it?
I think so. It was in a cupboard. Wasn't hidden away.
Antimony is colorless and pretty well tasteless. Your wife consumed it in a great deal of brandy. Your wife was fond of brandy?
Yes.
She drank a great deal of it?
Yes.
Tell me, are you yourself a drinker?
I never touch it.
But you didn't object to your wife drinking?
Well, I didn't like it.
A search of the flat revealed no empty spirit bottles of any kind. Isn't that rather unusual?
I'd taken a lot away the night before.
Where to?
I took them to a park nearby.
Silence in the court. And you took the bottles to a park regularly?
I was in love with my wife. She drank. I couldn't stop her. I wanted to keep it a secret. I was ashamed. I loved her. I loved her.
And so it went on and on. The Crown prosecutor was very patient. The neighbors had sworn that Cherry never drank, that she was always cheerful, happy. It was proved that Harold Warren was nearly bankrupt at the time of Cherry's death. All that day, the Crown went over and over the evidence, probing, checking. That night at home, I felt weary and sick. Drink. A brandy drinker. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it, Jan.
Jim, please.
Nobody believes it. Nobody could believe it.
Jim, darling.
I'm sorry, Jan. It's been a long day. Look, let's face this thing honestly, Jan. It amounts to this. Either Harold Warren is a murderer of the most fiendish kind, or else Cherry committed suicide.
There's no chance of accident.
Not with brandy saturated with antimony. Darling, what do you think of Warren?
Well, I want to be honest, Jim. I know how you feel. But I like him.
Like him?
Oh, I know you loathe him, Jim. Most men would. But there's a peculiar fascination about him.
Go on.
As if he were... Well, I was almost going to say... Well, he's my idea of a Bluebeard.
A Bluebeard? Well, that's a thought, I must say. Association of ideas, darling.
Yes, I suppose so. But sitting there in the court this morning, he fascinated me. He was so fine and handsome and honest-looking. Yet there was something wrong somewhere.
I think I know what you mean. I felt something of that, too. The Crown Prosecutor, he feels it.
He's a clever lawyer, darling.
I know. He's fighting like a tiger to trap Warren. But it's all so circumstantial, so secret.
As if Harold Warren had drawn a heavy veil over all that ever happened in that flat. He's a devil, Jim. I know it. He's bad.
I'm going to bed. There's tomorrow yet, and my evidence. And I'll fight with everything I have.
Cherry Warren was your half-sister?
Yes.
When did you last see your sister alive?
A week before her wedding. She came to my house one evening. It was a surprise visit. Cherry and I saw each other very seldom. She looked beautiful that night.
You look wonderfully well, Jimmy. Married life must suit you.
Thanks, I think so too. Now sit down and tell me all the news. Drink?
No, thanks. I never touch it, silly. Jimmy, I'm going to be married.
Why, Cherry, that's wonderful. Oh, no wonder you look so radiant.
Do I?
Simply terrific. I couldn't make it out. I might have guessed.
Or taken a look at my left hand. Jimmy, I'm so happy.
You look it. Here, let me give you a great big brotherly kiss. There. I'm glad, Cherry. Really glad. Oh, I know we've never been very close to each other.
I know.
But I'm very fond of you. You're a great little kid. I wish you all the very best in the world.
Thanks, Jimmy.
And who's the lucky man?
Harold Warren.
Do I know him?
I don't think so. I haven't known him, well, very long. You'll like him, Jimmy. He's the finest man I know.
He's the luckiest. Well, you must come and see us together often.
He's so kind and good and tender. Oh, Jimmy, I've never been in love before. I never knew the world could be such a wonderful place.
Well, you have got it bad. Come on, come and tell Janet the good news.
Oh, Jimmy, while I think of it, Father's money, left in our names, can we have it now, by agreement?
Why, yes, I suppose so. Of course. But
Thanks, Jimmy. I knew you'd say yes. Oh, Jimmy, it's grand to be alive. Just to go on being happy.
It was grand to be alive. Then.
I'm sorry. I know this is very upsetting. But what did you think of your sister's sudden demand to have the money put under separate accounts?
I was very much surprised.
But then, of course, she was entitled to half of this 12,000 that your father had left.
Oh, yes, it wasn't that. It was the peculiar way she put it. As if she'd been screwing up her courage to say it. As if somebody had prompted
I
her.
object, Your Honor. Sustained. Witness will refrain from speculations. Then I shall put it in another way. Tell me, had you and your sister come to any previous agreement about that money?
Yes, we had agreed never to touch that money, ever. The interest from it was sufficient for our needs.
Mr. Harper, have you ever known your sister to drink?
No, my sister did not drink.
Do you think your sister committed suicide?
No, I can never believe that.
Then, ruling out the possibility of accident, it seems...
I object. Witness should not be led to draw conclusions.
As you wish. Your witness. Thank you.
Mr. Harper, you didn't see your sister very often.
No.
So during the years since your father's death, you knew very little about her.
Well, yes.
She could easily have been living any kind of life, and you wouldn't have known.
I suppose not.
She could have been, say, a heavy gambler. Even a drunkard.
No.
When she came to your home that night, you offered her a drink?
Yes, but It was only a gesture. Only polite.
But you did offer her a drink.
Yes.
Thank you. You say your sister and you had agreed never to touch your father's legacy. That was a written agreement?
Well, no. We didn't need it.
I see, merely a verbal one.
Yes, but that doesn't mean...
In fact, there may not have been that agreement at all.
That isn't true. We didn't
Thank
need...
you, Your Honor. That's all.
Yes, that was all. So little to go on. All of it circumstantial. All I had was that strange, horrible feeling about Warren as he sat half smiling in the dock. That and the memory of the night I saw Cherry. Crown prosecutor made his summing up. Throughout the speech, I never took my eyes off Warren. He sat there quite impassive. Only once did he show any emotion other than that secretive smile. Gave a sudden angry flicker of his eyes as the Crown prosecutor described him as an actor. A first-class actor. Something, I couldn't tell what it was, had hit home. The jury retired. Hour after hour went by. I went home, and Janet and I drank coffee and waited.
What time is it?
Midnight. Just after.
You've been out a long time.
Yes.
Poisoning. I don't envy them, Jim.
Oh, I don't envy them either.
And Warren in his cell, waiting.
Yes.
Go to bed, darling. They may be out all night.
I couldn't sleep. I can't forget that last night she came here. It haunts me.
I've never been in love before. I never knew the world could be such a wonderful place.
Oh, Jim.
Hello? Yes. I see. No, nothing. Not guilty.
Oh, darling.
I don't believe it, Jan. Warren's guilty, all right. And even if it takes me a lifetime, I'll prove it.
Part 2 of the trial of Harold Warren begins in just a moment. But first, your announcer. We resume the trial of Harold Warren.
Next morning, I went to see Inspector Morris, who'd been in charge of the investigations against Harold Warren. He received me cordially, but could do little to help. We had a long talk.
And there it is, Mr. Harper. Poison cases are always tricky. Never be surprised at a jury's verdict in a poison case.
I still don't believe, Inspector Morris, that my sister committed suicide. I can't.
The court declared Warren not guilty. But if you find out anything, Mr. Harper, we'll give you every support.
It was a start. Inspector Morris was uncertain and bound to the verdict not guilty. I wasn't. I first checked the fact that Cherry and Warren had been deer-struck me. Had Warren been married at any time before? The Registrar General's office started the search.
Yes, here we are, sir. I think this may be what you want.
A marriage record?
That's right, sir. 4 years ago, Harold Warren and Elsie Neal in Stanton, sir.
Stanton? Where's that?
Oh, it's a small town out west, about 20 miles from Bankside.
I see. Thank you. And now, can I have a copy of that certificate? It will help me in a certain investigation I'm making. I was excited. I thought the matter over in a nearby coffee inn and then went back to the registrar's office. But there was no further record of Elsie Neal. No death certificate, no divorce proceedings. Either Harold Warren's first wife was still alive and he was a bigamist, or else... I went back to Inspector Morris.
Yes, looks like you unearthed something after all.
I think I have.
Well, I'll hold him on a bigamy charge to start with. Are you still interested in following this up?
I certainly am. I have a little matter of business to attend to that's taking me straight to Stanton.
You want a room, mister?
Yes, please.
Well, I've got a single room empty at the back. Will that do you?
Well, that'll do. Hopper's my name, James Hopper.
Oh, mine's Ted Jordan. Pleased to meet you. Staying long?
Oh, I don't know. I'm looking for a girl.
Ah, now you're talking. All the same, you young fellas, I knows you. What's her name?
Elsie. Elsie Neal. Or Warren.
Or Warren? Yeah. Married, you mean?
Yes.
Well, that's different. You the police?
No, I'm from the Goliath Trustees. The Warrens have been left a lot of money. I'm looking for them.
You don't say. Oh, now I know who you mean. Elsie and Harry Warren. Well, some people have all the luck. Not that they needed it anyhow.
What do you mean?
Well, she had plenty. Nice little kid. Very sick, though. Came out here to get some sun into her bones. And she looked like plenty of money to me.
I see. You remember her husband?
Yeah, nice fella. Wasn't here long. Lived round in Higson Street. She'd only been here a couple of weeks, and they was married right off.
Quite a man.
Nice fella. Bit of an actor, too.
Actor?
Yeah, he was in a couple of the local shows they had. Not bad either, he wasn't.
Actor? I see. And then they left?
Oh, well, she did. Quit him one night and left him broken-hearted. Poor fella went after her, though. I never did hear how he got on.
Yes. Well, I have a photograph of him here. Is this the man, Mr. Jordan?
No, that ain't him.
It isn't?
No, sir, that ain't the bloke I knew.
Oh. Well, apparently I'm on the wrong track after all. You're sure it isn't him?
No, I'm positive. That I knew had a moustache and a lot more hair.
I see. Tell me, did this man Warren that you knew run the local concerts himself?
Oh, plays they was, not concerts. Not bad either. No, the rector ran them, sir. Mr. Hills, round at the rectory in Smith Street. Nice fellow, but a bit queer, though.
Queer?
Eyebrow. Knows too much for us, not our kind. Fond of roses, though.
Oh, I think I'll go and see him.
Okay, you'll most likely find him in his garden. Sorry I couldn't help you. See you later.
I went round to see Mr. Hills. The question of the photograph is a little puzzling. But moustaches can be shaved off. So can hair. Mr. Hills was a tall, scrawny-looking man of 50-odd. He was tending his roses.
Now, look. Isn't that a beautiful rose? Talisman. I have more luck with my roses than with my parishioners, I'm afraid. I've been expecting you.
Me? What?
You, I take it, are James Hopper?
Yes, how did you guess?
I didn't. I've seen your photograph. As a man, I have two comforts in life. My wife, who is deaf, poor soul, and the city papers. I read everything, even the advertisements.
I see. Then you know a great deal about Harold Warren.
More than most people. The verdict was not guilty, but you are justice, still hunting him, an eye for an eye. Primitive, but very human. I think I can help you.
Look, I have a photograph here. Do you know this man, sir?
Why, yes, of course. Harold Warren. A very vivid likeness.
And yet I showed it to Mr. Jordan at the commercial.
Yes, and he didn't recognize it. He wouldn't, of course. A good man, but lacking in intelligence.
And about this Harold Warren, sir?
Ah, an evil creature. Married a girl here named Elsie Neal. I performed the ceremony, unfortunately. A pretty child, not really sinful. Now that, I believe, is the finest rose I've seen this week. Beautiful. He married her for her money and then killed her.
You know he killed her?
Why, of course, just as you know he did. But neither of us has any proof.
But you must have had suspicion.
Which I should have taken to the police, eh? No, my friend. Constable Jordan is our innkeeper friend's brother. Sadly literate. Oh, I could do nothing.
But, sir...
Murder was done. The girl was at rest. I pray for Harold Warren's soul. You are justice. You want his life. They lived at number 7 Higson Street. Warren left town a few days after Elsie disappeared. This rose bush is quite dead, I'm afraid. The day before he left, he put new concrete on the garage floor.
An urgent telegram to Inspector Morris brought 2 detectives to Stanton. The next day, we dug up the garage floor. 2 days later, Harold Warren was arrested and charged with the murder of Elsie Neal. Warren still denied his guilt. Throughout the preliminary investigations, the only answer he would give to every question was no. The Crown prosecutor decided that the only way out was to trap him into an admission, and he prepared his case accordingly. I watched Warren as he sat on trial in the dock. He still wore that half smile, but the Crown prosecutor was a different man this time. He was ready to pounce.
Harold Warren, have you ever lived in a town called Stanton?
No, never.
Have you ever heard of this town of Stanton?
Never.
Let me refresh your memory. Stanton lies about 200 miles due west from here, and the nearest large town is Bankside. Trains only run there 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays.
Not on Wednesdays.
Not on Wednesdays. You're quite correct, but how did you know there is no Wednesday train?
I didn't.
What did you say?
I just thought that...
Why did you say that?
Nothing.
Why did you say there was no Wednesday train? Why?
All right. I was there. I knew the place.
I see. You lived in Stanton?
No, I just passed through. I remember now. One Wednesday at Bankside, I tried to catch a train. That's how I knew.
And how long were you in Stanton?
It's only 2 days.
Just long enough to marry Elsie Neal?
No, that isn't true. I've never heard of her.
And yet I have here before me a certificate of marriage between you and Elsie Neal.
Oh, all right. I married her. But I didn't kill her. She just cleared out. You can't prove that.
Doesn't it appear at all strange to you, Warren, that your wife, with whom you had quarreled and who had left you, should still be satisfied to hand over to you her entire fortune?
I don't know anything about that. All I know is
you made no effort to find her?
No.
The charge against you is the murder of this woman. Are you aware, Warren, that the body of Elsie Warren was found buried underneath the garage floor of a house in Stanton?
I don't know anything about it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
I want you to describe Elsie Neal to the court at the time you say she left you.
She was beautiful. I was in love with her. I loved her.
I ask you to describe this woman to the court.
She was small, dark, pretty.
You would know her again if you saw her?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have here a photograph of this woman. I ask that the clerk of the court hand it to Warren. Certainly. Thank you. Now, Warren, you have in your hand a photograph of Elsie Neal, your first wife. Well, go on, look at it, man.
Yes, that's her.
You're quite convinced that that is your first wife?
Yes.
It's a remarkably good photograph, isn't it?
That's her.
That is the woman you killed one night in Stanton 4 years ago.
No, I didn't kill her, I tell you.
At this juncture, Your Honor, I wish to remind the court that antimony, as was revealed at the previous trial, has the peculiar and unique property of killing life and yet of preserving the flesh. Now, would you turn the photograph over and read what you see printed on the back, Warren?
I hereby declare and testify that this photograph of Elsie Neal was taken... No!
That photograph was taken yesterday!
No! All right! I killed her! I did!
It was all over. Warren was led shouting from the court. That same afternoon, he wrote his confession. A month later, he was hanged.
In a moment, I'll return with further news of these real-life dramas of the courts. But first, your announcer.
The court
court is adjourned until next week. Be listening next week, same time, same station, when we present another real-life story in Dramas of the Court. Dramas of the Court. We present the dramatic story of our court, where daily the unbiased administration of justice is dealt to rich and poor alike. These dramatizations in fictionized form are typical of the human interest dramas that daily crowd our court. Tonight, the Hastings case.
Gentlemen of the jury, the administration of good government is based on a sound judicial system. In considering the case before you, weigh carefully all the evidence and be convinced beyond all reasonable doubt of the guilt or innocence of the accused before delivering your verdict.
Crown versus Eric Hastings.
I wonder how many of you remember the Hastings case. Not many, I should imagine. After all, the reason I remember it so well is because I was not only closely associated with the people involved, but was also called as a witness at the trial. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering who I am, my name is Marsden, Geoffrey Marsden. I'm a stockbroker, and it was shortly after Eric Hastings came to work for me that I first met his mother. Barbara Hastings was an extremely wealthy widow, with one major interest in life, the buying of precious stones. It was almost a mania with her. Yet, even though she'd think nothing of spending hundreds of pounds on an emerald or a ruby, I've known her to walk half a mile rather than pay a threepenny tram fare. Yes, she was a strange woman. All the same, there was something very likable about her. It was not long before we'd become quite good friends. Then, late one afternoon, about 3 years ago, while I was sitting in my office... Oh, darn that phone. Hello?
That you, Jeff?
Yes, who's that?
It's me, Barbara. Sorry to trouble you like this, but could you come over and see me? Something dreadful's happened.
What?
I'd rather not say over the phone. Please come, Jeff. Please.
Right, I'll be with you in about 20 minutes.
Jeff, thank heaven you finally got here.
Barbara, what is it?
I've been robbed.
What's that?
My sapphire pendant and earrings. They've been stolen.
When?
Last night while I was asleep.
You're quite sure they've been stolen?
There was no doubt about it. I locked them in my safe just before I went to bed. And this afternoon when I went to the safe again, they were gone.
Have you notified the police yet?
No, I thought I'd speak to you first.
Well, then you better get in touch with them at once.
Very well.
Just a moment. Do any of the servants know?
Only my maid, Margaret. She was with me when I opened the safe.
Did you tell her not to say anything about it to the others?
Yes.
How about Eric?
I tried to get in touch with him when I was ringing you, but he wasn't there.
I wonder. Yes, it'll explain everything.
What is it, Jeff?
Oh, nothing, Barbara. Now, about the police.
I'll go and call them.
The police arrived while I was still there, and early that night, as a result of certain information I had given them concerning events that had previously taken place in my office, they arrested Eric Hastings and charged him with the theft of his mother's jewels. The case aroused quite a deal of interest, and when it finally came on for hearing some 4 or 5 weeks later, the courtroom was packed.
The first witness for the Crown was one of the policemen to whom Mrs. Hastings had reported the robbery. His evidence was of a purely routine nature, and when he left the witness box, I took his place. After preliminary questioning, the Crown prosecutor said,
On the day before Mrs. Hastings' jewels were stolen, I believe you had rather an unusual conversation with her son Eric.
Yes, that is so.
Mr. Marsden, I'd like you to tell the court exactly what was said during the course of that conversation.
Well, as soon as I arrived at work that morning, I asked my secretary to tell Eric that I wanted to see him at once. A few minutes later, he came into my office.
Oh, I believe you want to speak to me, Mr. Marsden.
Yes, Eric. Sit down, will you? Oh, thanks. Eric, I'm afraid what I'm going to say to you isn't going to be very pleasant. While I was working back last night, I made a rather disturbing discovery.
Yes, sir?
You remember those bonds I asked you to place in the strong room for me?
Yes.
They've disappeared. You were the last person to handle them. Do you know where they are?
Yes, I do, sir. I took them.
You mean you've stolen them?
No, sir. I merely borrowed them, that's all.
Borrowed them?
I needed some money urgently. £500. So I handed those bonds over as a security.
To whom?
To a moneylender. I was hoping I'd be able to redeem them again before you discovered they were missing.
You place me in a very awkward position, Eric. By rights, I should inform the police.
Oh, please, Mr. Marsden, don't.
I don't want to. And yet,
Perhaps if I were to return those bonds, sir.
Very well, Eric. If those bonds are back in this office within 48 hours, we'll say no more about it. But if they're not, then I'll have no alternative but to notify the police immediately.
You won't have to do that, Mr. Marsden. I'll get that money and return those bonds somehow. I swear.
And were those bonds returned, Mr. Marsden?
Yes.
When?
Eric handed them to me himself the following afternoon.
I see. And now, Mr. Marsden, I'd like you to tell the court of your phone conversation with Mrs. Hastings. What happened after you arrived at her home?
This I did, and some 10 minutes later, my evidence came to an end. Then, as the Crown prosecutor resumed his seat, counsel for the defense began his cross-examination.
I believe you said, Mr. Marsden, that my client returned those bonds to you during the afternoon.
That's right.
At what time during the afternoon, do you remember?
About half an hour before Mrs. Hastings phoned me.
Did you make any comments when he handed the bonds to you? For example, did you ask him where he'd got the money to redeem them?
Not quite as bluntly as that.
But you did ask him.
I said I hoped he'd come by the money honestly.
What was his reply?
That he'd won it at the races.
Did you believe him?
At the time, yes.
At the time? But not now, eh?
I don't know. I'd like to believe he was telling the truth. But after Mrs. Hastings informed me of her loss, well, it was such an odd coincidence.
That you finally told the police about those bonds.
I thought it my duty to tell them.
And as a result, my client was arrested.
That wasn't the only reason he was arrested.
No, perhaps not. But it was your statement that first aroused their suspicions, wasn't it?
Yes, I suppose it was.
Thank you, Mr. Marsden. That's all.
The next witness was Barbara herself. And within a few minutes she was telling the court of all that had happened during the 24 hours preceding the actual discovery of the theft.
I had been invited to a very important dinner that evening, and as I knew all the other women would be wearing their jewels, I decided to put on some of mine, too.
Yes, go on.
Well, after I had taken the case containing the pendant and the earrings from the safe, I placed it on my dressing table, and I went and had a bath. When I returned, I found Eric standing by the dressing table, holding the pendant in his hand.
Oh, hello, Mother.
Well, Eric, what are you doing here?
Waiting for you. I say, this is quite some stone, isn't it?
It should be, considering the price I paid for it.
What did it cost you?
1,500. That was with the earrings, of course. But it wasn't just to find out the value of my jewels that you're waiting for me, was it?
Oh, no, of course not. Mother, I need your help.
Oh, Eric, you're not going to ask me for money again, are you?
Yes, I want you to give me a check for...
I'm sorry, but you can't have it.
Mother, please, it's important.
I've given you my answer, Eric. I don't wish to discuss the matter any further. Besides, I'm in a hurry.
You know, sometimes I can't understand you at all. You'll give £1,500 for a pendant like this without batting an eyelid. And yet...
By the way, if you've quite finished playing that pendant, I'd like to put it on. Thank you. And now, would you please go and tell Margaret I want her? I'll never be dressed in time.
But... Oh, very well, Mother.
Margaret came in a few minutes later, and about half an hour after that, I left the house.
When did you return, Mrs. Hastings?
A little before 10.
And then what happened?
I went straight up to my bedroom. Margaret was waiting there for me. And as I entered, she looked up and said in rather a surprised tone,
"Oh, you're back early, aren't you, Mrs. Hastings? I wasn't expecting you for another hour at least."
"I'm not feeling very well, Margaret. I think I must have eaten something that disagreed with me."
"Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am."
Yes, it really quite spoiled my evening.
"Would you like me to get you something?"
"Hand me my jewel case first, will you please?" Thank you. Then, when you put my clothes away, you might bring me a glass of warm milk.
"Oh, very well, Mrs. Hastings."
About 15 minutes later, after she'd helped me into bed, Margaret left the room.
And how long was it before she came back?
She didn't come back.
But what about your glass of warm milk?
Eric brought it in to me.
Did he often do that?
No, that was the first time in years.
And now will you go on with your story, Mrs. Hastings?
Well, the next thing I remember was someone shaking me vigorously. Slowly I opened my eyes to discover that it was broad daylight. Then as I looked up, I saw Margaret staring at me anxiously.
"Oh, Mrs. Hastings, thank heaven you're awake at last."
Margaret. Oh, what's the matter?
Well, you were so sound asleep, I thought something must have happened to you. I've been shaking you for a good 5 minutes or more.
Oh, then it was... Oh, my head.
Mrs. Hastings, you're not ill, are you?
No, I don't think so.
And what's wrong? You're acting almost as if you'd been drugged.
Matter of fact, Margaret, that's exactly how I feel.
Would you like a glass of water?
Oh, no, I'll go right in a moment. It's just that... Oh, dear. Oh, it's so close in here.
Well, I don't wonder. All the windows are being closed.
Yes, I shut them myself when it began to rain.
Oh, are you sure I can't get you something, Mrs. Hastings? Just smelling salts, perhaps.
Before I could stop her, Margaret had left the room.
Did anything else happen during the day, Mrs. Hastings? Anything that might have some bearing on this case?
No, not that I can remember.
And when did you finally discover that your pendant and earrings were missing?
Late that afternoon, about 5 minutes before I rang Mr. Marsden.
Thank you, Mrs. Hastings. That is all. Your witness.
But before counsel for defense could begin his cross-examination, the court adjourned for lunch.
Court's adjourned.
In just a moment, we shall continue with our story of the Hastings case. But first, a word from our announcer. Here once again is Geoffrey Marsden to tell you the rest of his story of the Hastings case.
As soon as the court had resumed after its luncheon adjournment, Barbara returned to the witness box, and a few moments later, counsel for the defense began his cross-examination.
In the course of your evidence, Mrs. Hastings, you've made several references to a safe. Exactly what type of a safe is it?
A wall safe with a combination lock.
Where is it?
In my bedroom.
How is it hidden? It is hidden, I presume?
Behind a small picture.
And to open the safe, you have to remove this picture from the wall, do you?
Yes.
Do many people know where that safe is?
Oh, quite a number. My son, my maid, all my servants, in fact.
Anyone else?
Yes, several of my friends. Mr. Marsden, for example.
I see. Now, with regard to the combination, have you ever told it to anyone?
No, never.
Then, Mrs. Hastings, you're the only person who knows how to open that safe.
I thought I was, but after what's happened, apparently I was mistaken.
Do you keep a copy of the combination in the house at all, to refresh your memory in case you should ever forget it?
Not in the house.
But you do keep a copy of it?
Yes.
Where?
In my safe deposit at the bank.
Are you the only one who has access to it, Mrs. Hastings?
My son has been to it several times for me.
Anyone else?
Yes. Margaret, my maid.
Then either of those two persons could have learnt the combination of the safe without you knowing it.
Yes. Yes, I suppose they could have.
Tell me, Mrs. Hastings, are you a light sleeper?
Ordinarily, yes.
Why do you say ordinarily?
Because on the night the robbery was committed, I had been drugged.
You're quite convinced of that?
Yes, quite convinced of it.
How do you think that drug was administered to you?
Why, in the glass of warm milk, of course.
Do you ever take sleeping pills, Mrs. Hastings?
No, never.
Does anyone in the house take them?
Not that I know of.
I see. When your son brought that milk into you instead of your maid, were you surprised?
A little.
When did you drink that milk?
Well, I took a few sips of it while Eric was still with me.
And then finished it as soon as he had gone, eh?
Yes.
Did it taste at all peculiar?
No. No, it didn't.
When did you finally decide that you had been drugged?
Well, it was Margaret who first gave me the idea. Then that afternoon, after I discovered the loss of my pendant and earrings, I was sure of it.
What first aroused your suspicions? What made you go to the safe that afternoon?
The picture. Margaret noticed it was hanging at an angle. As soon as she had drawn my attention to it, I unlocked the safe and took out my jewel case. Then when I opened it and saw that the pendant and earrings were missing, I realized at once what had happened.
You're quite sure you locked them in the safe?
It was one of the first things I did after I'd returned home the previous evening.
And now, Mrs. Hastings, just one final question. Were the pendant and the earrings insured?
Yes.
For how much?
£1,500.
Thank you, Mrs. Hastings. That is all.
The final witness for the Crown was Margaret Booth, Mrs. Hastings' maid. The major part of her evidence was of a purely corroborative nature, and it was not until she had finished confirming Barbara's testimony that the Crown prosecutor at last said,
Tell me, Miss Booth, do you ever take sleeping pills?
No, never.
You know anyone living in the Hastings house who does?
Yes, Mr. Eric.
Silence in the court! And now, Miss Booth, there's just one other point I'd like to clear up. When you went to get Mrs. Hastings' milk, I believe the accused spoke to you.
Yes, he stopped me in the hall, just after I'd come out of her room, and he said that.
That was my mother I heard come in just a few minutes ago, wasn't it, Margaret?
That's right, Mr. Hastings.
She's home early, isn't she?
She isn't feeling well, so she's gone to bed.
Have you put a light out yet?
No, I'm just going to take her a glass of warm milk.
Will you let me take it into her? Please, Margaret. I must speak to her before she goes to sleep.
Oh, very well then, Mr. Hastings.
When you returned with the milk, did Mr. Hastings take it into her immediately?
No, he hesitated a few minutes. In fact, as I went downstairs again, he was still standing outside the bedroom door.
That is all, Miss Booth, thank you. Your witness. Miss Booth, a few moments ago you said my client took sleeping pills. How do you know that?
He told me so himself.
When?
About a week before the robbery. He had a small bottle in his hand at the time, and when I asked him what was in it, he said there were pills to make him sleep.
And now, Miss Booth, after you handed Mr. Hastings that glass of milk, did you see him drop anything into it?
No, I didn't.
When you awakened Mrs. Hastings the next morning, what made you so sure that she'd been drugged?
Well, she seems so dazed, so...
It wasn't because you knew she'd been drugged, was it?
I don't know what you mean.
Then I'll put it to you another way, Miss Booth. I'm suggesting that you took some of those sleeping pills from my client and placed them in Mrs. Hastings' milk yourself.
Oh, that's not true.
After all, you had ample opportunity. just as you had ample opportunity for learning the combination of the safe. Then, when Mrs. Hastings was asleep, you crept into her room and stole that pendant and the earring.
Oh, no, it's lies, all of it. You've no right to say such things.
A few moments later, Margaret left the box, and the Crown case came to an end. The first witness for the defense was Eric Hastings, the accused, and under the skillful questioning of his counsel, it was soon apparent that he was creating a more than favorable impression on the members of the jury. But when the Crown prosecutor began his cross-examination, this impression quickly faded.
And now, Mr. Hastings, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions regarding those bonds you borrowed from Mr. Marsden.
Yes.
You say you won the money to redeem those bonds at the races.
That's right.
£500, wasn't it?
Yes.
Rather a large amount to win at the races, don't you think?
I was lucky. I backed a rank outsider. Rampart in the second race. 50 to 1.
I see. Mr. Hastings, are you in the habit of taking sedatives?
No, I'm not.
Then why did you suddenly buy a bottle of sleeping pills?
Well, it's because I was worried about those bonds.
I see. And this constant worrying kept you awake at night, did it?
Yes. And so, in order to get some sleep, I bought a bottle of pills.
Tell me, Mr. Hastings, why were you so anxious to take that milk into your mother? What did you want to speak to her about?
I wanted to persuade her to let me have the money I needed, but she wouldn't listen to me. Made me leave almost immediately.
After Margaret had given you the milk, why did you hesitate outside the door?
I was trying to make up my mind whether to tell her the truth or not about the bonds and why I needed the money. I was desperate.
So desperate that in order to obtain that money, you decided to drug your mother with those sleeping pills you'd brought and then steal her pendant and earring.
No, you're wrong.
And then the next day, having disposed of those jewels, you made up that story about winning the money at the race.
It's not true, none of it. I didn't drug my mother, nor did I steal her pendant and earrings. You've got to believe me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hastings, but I prefer to believe facts. And those facts prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that you and you alone are guilty.
It was at this point that the court adjourned for the day. That night I went to visit Barbara at her home. She seemed strangely ill at ease, and I'd been with her for about half an hour when she suddenly turned to me and said,
Jeff, you don't really think the jury will find Eric guilty, do you?
I'm sure of it, Barbara. After all, he had both the motive and the opportunity.
But what about Margaret?
Opportunity, but no motive.
No, Jeff, no, they can't find him guilty. They mustn't.
Rather ironical, isn't it, Barbara?
Ironical?
You never thought for one moment that such a strong case would be built up against Eric, did you?
I don't know what you mean.
It's no use, my dear. You know as well as I do that your pendant and earrings weren't really stolen.
But of course they were stolen.
No. You took them from the safe yourself.
But that's ridiculous. I was asleep. I'd been drugged.
You weren't drugged, Barbara. You were only pretending. Why, you've admitted that in your evidence.
I've admitted it?
So completely that... Do you remember saying that when Margaret awakened you, she commented on the fact that all your bedroom windows had been closed?
Yes, I remember it.
You shut those windows yourself, didn't you?
When it began to rain.
It did rain that night. Round about 12:30. But according to your story, Barbara, you went to bed and drank that milk shortly after 10. If you'd been drugged, you couldn't have been awake 2 hours later.
Oh, Jeff, what a fool I've been.
Why did you do it, Barbara?
Collecting precious stones is a very expensive hobby. I was badly in need of money.
But why pretend that you'd been robbed? If you needed money, why didn't you sell some of your stones?
Sell my stones? Jeff, you realize what you're saying? Why, I love all my stones so much that if ever I had to part with any of them, I think it'd break my heart.
They mean as much as that to you, do they? I had no idea. But I still don't understand. Why did you pretend that you'd been robbed?
That pendant and the earrings were heavily insured.
Of course. You faked the robbery in order to get the money from the insurance company.
Yes, and I'd got away with it, too,
If such a strong case hadn't been built up against Eric.
Oh, he's my son. I can't let him go to prison for a crime he didn't commit.
Then you're going to tell the truth, are you, Barbara? You're going to confess that you stole those jewels yourself?
Yes, Jeff. There's nothing else to do.
As was only to be expected, Barbara's confession in court the next morning caused quite a sensation. Eric was released immediately. A few weeks later, Barbara was committed to trial, and on being found guilty of having faked a robbery in order to defraud the insurance company, was sentenced to a term of imprisonment. A stupid fraud by a foolish woman. It seems no time at all after the judge passed sentence that the case was forgotten, and the Hastings case was relegated to the dusty files of legal history.
In a moment, I'll return with further news of these real-life dramas of the courts. But first, your announcer.
The court is adjourned until next week.
Be listening next week, same time, same station, when we present another real-life story in Dramas of the Court. Dramas of the Court. We present the dramatic story of our court, where daily the unbiased administration of justice is dealt to rich and poor alike. These dramatizations in fictionized form are typical of the human interest dramas that daily crowd our courts. Tonight, the trial of Frank Stevens.
Gentlemen of the jury, the administration of good government is based upon a sound judicial system. In considering the case before you, weigh carefully all the evidence and be convinced beyond all reasonable doubt of the guilt or innocence of the accused before delivering your verdict.
The Crown versus Frank Stevens.
One November Friday, in a large eastern city, shortly before noon, Rita Manville, bookkeeper in the Clayton Canning Company, left the factory to draw the week's payroll. Frank Stevens, the foreman, accompanied her as her bodyguard. She drew the money, some £2,000, put it in her brown leather briefcase, and started back from the bank with Stevens. A short time later, Constable Hastings, on beat duty, suddenly heard the sharp crack of 3 shots in rapid succession, followed by a woman's piercing scream.
Hastings made his way to a lane between two large buildings. At the entrance to the lane stood the foreman, Frank Stevens, a smoking gun in his hand. He was looking frantically up and down the street.
Did I see who?
The hold-up man. We were coming through this lane on our way back from the bank and stepped out of a doorway and grabbed the briefcase with the money in it away from Rita.
There's been a robbery.
Oh, when she fought with him, he shot her, and then he took a pot shot at me and ran away. I followed him up the lane and fired at him a couple of times. Well, I must have missed, I suppose, because when I got to the entrance here, he was gone.
Okay, wait a minute. Who's Rita and who's been shooting who and why?
Well, Rita Manville, our head bookkeeper, and I were carrying a payroll when this fellow...
First of all, what are you doing with that gun in your hand?
Oh, it's mine. I told you I was trying...
And where's this Rita?
She's lying back there in the lane. I'm afraid she's hurt bad.
Huh? Well, come on, let's go back and see.
I want to have a look at this. Oh, come on. Constable.
Yes, miss. What is it?
Bend over. I'm dying. Constable. Listen.
Get a doctor. Get an ambulance.
Wait a minute. He's trying to tell me something. He's sitting up. He's pointing.
Constable. He shot me. He shot me.
She's dead. She was pointing at you. She said you killed her.
No, it wasn't me. She was out of her head.
We'll see about that. You're under arrest.
Because of Rita's dying accusation and other evidence, Stevens was committed and tried for murder. 2 months later, a packed courtroom heard Hastings tell the story of how, with her last breath, the dying girl accused Stevens. His evidence was damning, but the defense showed every sign of confidence as he cross-examined.
Constable, you say the girl sat up and said someone shot her?
No. She said he shot me and pointed at the defendant.
Did she say Stephen shot me?
No.
Just he shot me?
Yes.
Where was Stephen since she pointed?
Next to me.
Was there anybody behind the two of you?
Why, yes. A crowd of people had followed us into the lane.
Couldn't Miss Manville have been pointing at someone behind Stephen?
Well, it seemed to me she was pointing right at him.
Now, isn't it a fact that she was bleeding profusely as she lay there in the lane?
Yes.
Was her voice strong when she spoke to you?
No, it was quite weak.
Was it steady or shaky?
It was shaky.
She seemed in great pain.
Yes, she did.
So, on the basis of what this dying woman in great pain, shaky and weak, said, and for no other reason, you arrested the defendant.
I did.
Did you take the gun from the defendant?
Yes.
What caliber was it?
.38 caliber.
Did you find any other gun in the defendant's possession? Or anywhere about, in the lane, the street?
No, I did not.
That's all.
Thank you.
Several witnesses who had been in the lane when Rita died corroborated the constable's testimony that Rita had pointed to Stevens, but none of them could swear to it. A police surgeon then testified the girl had been killed by two .32 caliber bullets, and the defense at once pointed out that the gun Hastings took from Stevens was not the murderer's gun, as it was a .38. Then the Crown called Robert Clayton, owner of the factory, a dignified, white-haired man of 60. After he had stated that Miss Manville had worked for him as bookkeeper for 16 years and Stevens as foreman for 7, and that they were both valuable employees, the Crown prosecutor asked,
Did Stevens and Miss Manville cooperate with each other at all times?
For a time they did, but about a year ago they began to disagree with each other about nearly everything. They were always snarling and fighting. I talked to Stevens about it. He said he didn't understand it, that Miss Manville seemed to have taken a personal dislike to him.
Did you ask Miss Manville what the trouble was?
I did, and she said one day in my office...
I don't trust Stevens, Mr. Clayton. That's why I fight with him.
Don't trust him? What do you mean?
You know our last inventory showed £650 worth of goods not accounted for by sales?
Rita, for heaven's sake, are you accusing Stevens?
Stevens is the only one in the factory besides yourself who has the keys. I tell you, he's been robbing you right and left.
Wait a minute.
What's that you said about me?
Eavesdroppers seldom hear any good of themselves.
Not when they listen to suspicious old maids. Mr. Clayton, this woman hates me. She wants to run the whole factory, and she's jealous of the way you trust me.
It isn't that at all, Mr. Clayton. I'm telling you openly and frankly, I don't trust this man.
Why, you rotten little...
Don't use language like that, Stevens.
All right. But if I ever hear her talking about me like that again, so help me, I'll use something stronger than language on her.
How did Stevens and Miss Manville behave to each other after this?
I forced them to make it up, but there was always a strain between them. It distressed me greatly. Then, while I was worrying about this, I got a bad attack of arthritis, and the doctor ordered me to a health resort. And one night, just after I went to bed, about 10 o'clock, a long-distance call came through for me. What's that? Hello, what is it?
Mr. Robert Clayton?
Yes?
Long distance call for you. Here's your number.
Thank you.
Mr. Clayton, is that you?
Yes, who's speaking?
It's Rita Mandel.
Rita, what's happened? Anything wrong at the factory?
I'm sorry, yes. Mr. Clayton, two of the hands just came to me and told me Stevens has been forcing them to give him part of their pay every week for the past 6 months in order to keep their jobs.
That's blackmail. It's outrageous.
I always told you Stevens was a crook. Now I've got definite proof. When I accused him, he actually threatened my life.
Why did you accuse him?
But I couldn't help it, Mr. Clayton. When I thought of the way he was taking advantage...
Never mind that. What did he say?
He said I was just a suspicious old busybody, and that the firm wasn't big enough for both of us anymore. I told him that this time I could prove my suspicions, and that I was going to tell you as soon as you got back. And then he said perhaps I wouldn't get the chance, and that frightened me, so I thought I'd better call you at once.
Yeah, you did right. I'll catch the first train back. I'll be at the factory by tomorrow afternoon. Don't talk to anyone about this till then.
I won't. Goodbye, Mr. Clayton. I'll see you tomorrow.
But when I arrived at my factory, Rita was dead.
I see, Mr. Clayton. Well, that is all. Your witness.
Mr. Clayton, was Stevens the first person Miss Manville ever accused of theft in the factory?
No, she accused several people at one time or another.
Was she ever able to prove any of these accusations?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Is it not a fact that she was of a very suspicious nature, constantly suspecting and accusing people of cheating or robbing you?
I wouldn't say that. She merely was always watching out for my interests. She was very loyal.
The two factory hands who were accusing Stevens of taking money from them, did Rita Manville mention their names on the phone?
No, I didn't ask her. I didn't want her to mention names on the phone.
Since your return, has any one of your employees come to you privately with a statement that he or she paid money to Stevens?
No.
Has anyone come forward and told you Stevens took money from him or her?
No, nobody has.
That is all, Mr. Clayton. Thank you very much.
The Crown then called Jim Turner, machinist, one of the maintenance men at the Clayton factory. After he had given evidence about his routine duties, the Crown prosecutor asked,
And besides these general repair duties, did you have any other duties in the factory, Turner?
Yes, I was Miss Manville's bodyguard when she went to the bank for the payroll on Fridays.
How did it happen Stevens acted as her bodyguard the Friday she was shot, and not you?
Well, I had to stay in the factory to fix the broken gear of one of the fitting machines. Well, Stevens went in my place.
Who put you to work on that broken gear?
Stevens did.
Did you usually carry a weapon when you accompanied Miss Manville?
Yes, always. A .38 caliber revolver in a shoulder holster.
Look at this revolver. Is it the one you always carried?
Yes, that's the one. I gave it to Stevens when he said he was going with Miss Manville that day instead of me. He took off his coat and put it on. I helped him to adjust it.
Now, Turner, while you were doing this, did you notice anything particularly about Stevens?
I did. I noticed a big bulge in his back pocket.
Did you remark about it?
I certainly did. Just as Stevens got his coat on, he said,
Yeah. That ought to take care of anyone who tries anything.
What you got there, another gun? Afraid mine isn't enough.
What are you talking about?
That bulge in your back pocket. It's a gun, isn't it?
Nothing of the sort. Mind your own business.
All right. I didn't mean anything.
Well, that is all. Your witness.
Turner, there was bad blood between you and Stevens, wasn't there?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I didn't like him much. But I never let my temper get the best of me.
Isn't it a fact that you asked him for a rise 3 months ago?
Yeah, I did.
And he turned you down?
That's true. What about it?
I suggest that out of revenge, you're putting the worst possible meaning to that bulge you saw in Stevens' back pocket.
No. I saw a bulge, all right.
But did you actually see a gun in his back pocket?
The bulge was the same shape as a gun.
I didn't ask you what shape the bulge was. I asked you and I asked you again. Did you actually see a gun in Stevens' back pocket?
Well, no, I didn't actually see a gun.
But you only saw a bulge that you're now trying to say looked like a gun. Isn't that so?
Well, it looked like it.
Never mind what anything looked like. Did you or did you not see a gun in his back pocket?
I did not.
That is all.
This concluded the Crown case. The Crown prosecutor was not entirely satisfied, but he hoped to bring out more damaging evidence in cross-examination of the defense witnesses. In any event, he had proven by inference that the defendant had had a strong motive for disposing of Rita Manville, and her dying accusation, as attested by several witnesses, had made a great impression on the jury. We'll bring you the defense in just a moment. But first, a word from our announcer. Now, back to the courtroom and the trial of Frank Stevens. The defense had every air of confidence as it called its first witness, one Andy Martin, popularly known as Baldy, a small, nervous man of about 40.
What is your occupation?
I runs a newspaper and cigarette kiosk next to the lane between the Associate Building and the Nash Tire Company.
How long have you been in business at this spot?
The past 6 years.
Were you in your kiosk just before noon on Friday, November the 9th?
Yes, I was. I heard shots in the lane next to my kiosk, and I heard a scream. I heard more shots. I looked out and saw a man running out of the lane.
You saw a man running out of the lane? What did he look like?
He was tall, dark complexioned. I couldn't see his face well, though. He had his hat pulled down low.
What was he wearing?
He had on a dark blue overcoat and grey felt hat. He was carrying a brown briefcase in his hand.
Did you notice in which direction he ran?
Yeah. He was running up the street away from my kiosk. I stuck my head out further and watched him. And then Mr. Stevens came out of the lane with a gun in his hand, looked up and down the street.
Did you leave your stand and go into the lane?
No, I wasn't looking for trouble. I'm on my own business.
Oh, that is all. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, you say you mind your own business, and yet the minute you heard those shots, you leaned over the counter to see what was happening.
Yes, I did that. I didn't stop to think whether I was minding my own business or not.
What if?
I heard the shots, and before I knew what I was doing, I was looking out and seeing this fellow running out of the lane.
Very fortunate. That's all.
The Crown prosecutor sat down with a discouraged look on his face. The defense's first witness had further weakened what was at best not too strong a case. Next, the defense called Frank Stevens, the defendant. A buzz of excitement swept the courtroom as he took the stand and was sworn in.
Mr. Stevens, tell His Honor and the jury the story of what happened when you escorted Miss Manville to the bank on November the 9th.
Well, we went to the bank and got the payroll. Rita put it in the brown briefcase and we started back. We walked through the lane. It was a shortcut to the factory and we always used it. Then, about halfway through the lane, this fellow jumped out and grabbed the briefcase from Rita. Rita started to struggle with him, and he shot her twice. I tried to get my gun out, and he shot at me, put a bullet through my hat. Then he ran up the lane towards the kiosk. I shot at him as I chased him, and I must have missed him. By the time I got to the street, I couldn't see him. Just then, the policeman came along.
And did you fire at the deceased?
Of course not. Those bullets came from a different gun, and I only had one.
Frank Stevens,
Did you ever ask for protection money from any employees of the Clayton Canning Company?
Never.
Was there any reason on earth why you should have wanted to kill Rita Manville?
Absolutely not.
That is all your witness.
Stephen, you worked for Mr. Clayton for 7 years. What job did you hold before that?
I was assistant foreman in a pulp and paper mill.
And it was here that you were charged and convicted for robbing the factory's safe, was it not?
Your Honor, I object. The defendant's past record has nothing to do with this case.
On the contrary, Your Honor, it has everything to do with it. Here is a man who obviously
The question
knows.
is allowed.
Well, Stephen, will you answer my question?
Yes, it's true. But I wasn't guilty. I was framed.
You were found guilty by a jury, and so were your two accomplices. Now, Stephen, you still keep your connections with the underworld, don't you?
No. I don't know anyone in the underworld. I never did.
But I suggest you do. I suggest you got a second gun from one of your underworld friends and used it on poor Rita Manville because she was going to expose your blackmailing activities to Mr. Clayton.
That's a lie. I'm not going to...
Order! And I suggest that you got rid of the gun in a very simple way. The so-called hold-up man took it away with him. Isn't that so?
No, of course not.
That is all.
With your Honor's permission, I wish to re-examine the defendant. Mr. Stevens, did your employer, Mr. Clayton, know about your prison record?
Yes, he knew. He believed I was innocent. He gave me a chance.
Have you been arrested or charged with any crime of any nature in the 7 years you worked for Mr. Clayton?
I have not.
That is all.
Counsel for the defense began his address by pointing out that the only concrete evidence against Stevens was the dying words of a jealous, half-delirious woman in mortal pain. He went on to state that no one single employee of the many in the factory had come forward to substantiate Miss Manville's statement that she had evidence of blackmail by Stevens. And above all...
Gentlemen of the jury, where is the weapon with which this crime was committed? It is not the weapon Stevens carried as a bodyguard. According to the prosecution, Stevens did this shooting. If so, what did he do with the revolver after he used it? Can a man kill a woman with a mysterious gun which nobody ever saw and would simply disappear after the shooting? Why hasn't the prosecution produced it in court? Because the police have been unable to locate either the man who really committed this crime or the gun with which he did it. As for the prosecution's fantastic story of a faked hold-up, I leave that to your common sense. I wish merely to point out there is not one single substantial witness against the defendant.
The court then adjourned for the day. Late that night, Baldy Martin, the kiosk proprietor, asleep in the shack in which he lived on the outskirts of town, was awakened by sounds down in the cellar. He got out of bed and went downstairs to investigate.
Who's that? What's going on here?
Hands up, Baldy. Don't turn around. I'm behind you. Good thing you came down. I don't like to work in the dark. Now I can turn on the light.
Who are you?
Me? Roy Delaney. And I'm a mate of a certain friend of yours.
You mean...
That's just who I mean. Keep your hands up, Baldy. Thought you're clever, eh? Going to disappear out of town with the cash tomorrow, eh?
I wasn't...
I trailed you to the railway station today. Planning to make a trip south, eh?
I didn't buy no ticket. I just asked what it cost. I wasn't meaning to leave town. Put down that gun, Roy. We can get together on a proposition. Just you and me. Nobody else has got to know.
Yeah, we can get together. And here's my proposition.
Savagely, Roy Delaney brought his gun butt down on Baldy's head. While he lay stunned, Delaney pulled a plank from the cellar floor and dug in the earth beneath with a shovel he found in the corner. In a few moments, he had what he was looking for, a brown briefcase. Bundling it under his arm, the intruder dashed up the stairs, slamming the door behind him.
All right. If that's the way he wants it, that's the way he'll get it. A rotten double-crosser. He's got the cash all right, but he's forgotten one thing. I've still got an ace in my hand, and I'm going to play it.
The next day, in court, the Crown prosecutor caused a sensation when he obtained the court's permission to reopen the case with vital new evidence. First, he called a police ballistics expert into the witness box. Then, recalled Baldy.
Do you wish to add to or change the evidence you gave yesterday?
You bet I do.
Look at this .32 caliber revolver. Is that the gun you brought to police headquarters last night?
Yes.
How long was this gun in your possession?
2 months. Kept it under the floor in my bedroom.
You've heard the expert state Miss Manville was killed by bullets from this gun. Did you fire those bullets?
I did not.
Do you know who did?
Yes.
Who was it? Who killed Rita Manville?
Frank Stevens.
It's a lie! Let me get him on that water nickel!
The court was thrown into indescribable confusion as police guards struggled to keep Stevens from attacking the witness. Order was finally restored, and Baldy went on.
Stevens came to me the day before the murder, and he said...
Baldy, how would you like to earn £1,000?
£1,000? Are you kidding?
No, this is on the level. All you have to do is leave the little side door to your kiosk open tomorrow just before noon.
But what if...
Listen. Tomorrow I'm going with our bookkeeper to get the payroll. When we get in the lane next to your kiosk, I'll shoot her.
Not on your life. If there's any killing, you can count me out.
Have it your own way. You wouldn't like me to tell the police that you've been taking bets on the horses, would you?
What do you want me to do?
Just leave that little door next to the lane open. After I shoot her, I'll fire my own gun a couple of times and run up to your end of the lane as though I was chasing somebody. I'll throw the money and the other gun into your kiosk and you hide 'em. If anybody asks you anything, you saw a fellow run out of the lane and up the street.
And what do I do with the cash and the gun? I don't want to get into trouble.
Just take the money home and hide it. Throw the gun in the harbour and neither of us will get into trouble. When everything blows over, we'll split the cash. And nobody's the wiser.
And what happened the next day?
He did just as he said he would. By the time the policeman got there, he'd thrown the stuff into my kiosk and I'd hid it in the empty box.
It's all lies! All of it!
I'm telling the truth, so help me God. But I didn't throw the gun in the harbour. I held on to it, just in case Stevens changed his mind and didn't give me my share.
He's lying. Look here, Judge. I didn't have nothing to do with it. Please, somebody listen to me, please!
It was obvious at last that Stevens had committed cold-blooded, premeditated murder. The jury lost no time in returning a verdict of guilty. Stevens was sentenced to death. His partner in crime, Roy, was quickly apprehended, tried, and given a long jail sentence. Stevens' dupe, Baldy, was also given a jail sentence, mitigated somewhat by his help in serving the cause of justice. In a moment, I'll return with further news of these real-life dramas of the courts. But first, your announcer.
The court is adjourned until next week.
Be listening next week, same time, same station, when we present another real-life story in Dramas of the Court. Dramas of the Court.
present the dramatic story of our court, where daily the unbiased administration of justice is dealt to rich and poor alike. These dramatizations in fictionized form are typical of the human interest dramas that daily crowd our courts. Tonight, the Cleveland case.
Gentlemen of the jury, the administration of good government is based upon a sound judicial system. On considering the case before you, weigh carefully all the evidence and be convinced beyond all reasonable doubt of the guilt or innocence of the accused before delivering your verdict.
Crown versus Frida Cleveland.
The nightmare which involved Frida, my wife, and myself in what the newspapers were pleased to call the Cleveland case began on the night of August the 14th. We'd gone to the Capricorn Club to dance. Neither of us was feeling like it. Just before we left home, we'd had a stupid quarrel over nothing.
Is that the second or the third bottle?
It's the first.
Oh. How easily your arithmetic is affected.
Look here, Frida, if you want to be unpleasant...
Must you shout? People are looking.
You'll be better off on your own for a while. Excuse me. I went to the cocktail bar. I stayed away 15 minutes. Frida and I, for the last 3 months, couldn't hit it off. I didn't know what was the matter. Then I thought I'd give it another chance. I'd go back and apologize. The table was empty when I returned. Frida was dancing with a total stranger. To me, though apparently not to her. A short, dapper, black-haired fellow, obviously foreign.
I am at the Wentworth apartments, Frida. Why not renew a mutually enjoyable acquaintance?
I'm married now, Tony.
Is that the lucky man at the table? The one with the frown?
Yes.
Really? Then come closer, my dear. Let us give him something to frown about.
Come and meet Gilbert.
It's such a pleasure.
Oh, you're back, Gilbert. Tony, this is Gilbert. Gilbert, this is Tony. Wasn't it lucky? Meeting him, I mean, saved the evening from becoming boring.
How do you do, Mr. Cleveland? I hope you are enjoying yourself.
Tony owns this place. It's marvelous, Tony. You have come on since...
See?
Since we last met.
Your cloak, Frida.
Ah, but surely you are not leaving.
I find the orchestra loud, the wine lukewarm, and the company offensive. Come on, Frida.
Frida,
I'll have to go.
Come and see me soon.
I'll try. Good night, Tony.
Hasta la vista.
You were rude, overbearing, and abominable.
Because I objected to that obvious lack in lust pouring over you? You've met him before?
Yes.
Where?
Before I met you.
I didn't imagine from your conduct towards him that it could have been afterwards.
That's the rotten sort of thing I'd expect from you. Stop the car.
What do you think you're doing?
I'll walk.
I stopped the car and Frida stamped off along the dim street with its film of rain, holding the skirt of her white evening frock from the pavement, a dark fur cloak swinging in annoyance. Yes, that's how it all began. I went to bed. Confound her, why should I wait up? I couldn't sleep. This was the most serious row we'd ever had, with the least reason. Obviously, she hadn't her key. I let her ring several times, and I put on a dressing gown and went to the door.
Mr. Cleveland?
Yes?
Can we talk to you for a few minutes, sir? It's rather urgent.
What?
It's a police matter.
A police? It's not my wife.
We'd better come in, sir. Is Mrs. Cleveland in?
No.
I see. Do you know where she is?
No, I don't. Look here, who are you?
Detective Inspector Hanlon, sir. Do you know anyone called Tony Costa?
Tony... at the Capricorn Club?
Yes.
I met him for the first time tonight. Why?
No, Sergeant Murray will answer it, sir.
I lost my bag. I think I left it at the club. I had to ring. Who are these people?
You lost your bag, Mrs. Cleveland. Is this it?
Why, yes. Where did you get it?
It was found in Tony Costa's apartment.
Tony? Why, how could it get there?
We thought you could explain that.
These men are police officers, Frida. Why should my wife explain anything, Inspector?
Because Mr. Costa has been murdered.
So, the nightmare began. And I was present at that ghastly operation they call a lineup. Frida in that whitewashed room with a dozen other women all in evening dress, standing under the glaring lights.
All right, bring in the lift man, Constable.
Yes, sir.
Lift man, Inspector?
A question of identification, Mr. Cleveland.
Good heavens, you don't think my wife did it, do you?
Please be quiet, Mr. Cleveland.
The lift man, still in uniform, went slowly along the line. Slowly. This was agony. Until he came to... Frida.
It was this one. This is the woman.
And so, gentlemen of the jury, the Crown will show that the accused knew the murdered man, Tony Costa, quite intimately. It will show that her evening bag was found in his apartment by the police. That a woman answering to her description was seen by the lift man at the apartment house at the time which medical evidence suggests was the hour that the fatal blow was struck with a bronze statuette of the Venus de Milo. The Crown will show that the accused woman there in the dock is guilty of the sordid and horrible crime of murder.
So the prosecution fitted the horrible chain together. Fitted it around Frida, who sat behind a spiked railing in the courtroom. Sunlight struggled through the high windows, down dimly on the wigs and black robes, and on the little Chinese who gave evidence.
Your name is Wong Si Lee. You were manservant of the deceased?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Tell the court what happened that night.
Mr. Tony came from club. He say, Wong, I expecting visitor. Don't disturb me. That is what Mr. Tony say. I know then it is a lady he's expecting later.
Did the lady arrive, Wong?
Yes, yes. I hear Mr. Tony let her in. And I hear him say, Madre Dolorosa. This is surprise. Come in.
You didn't see her, but you heard something else later on.
Yes, I hear lady's voice, loud sound. She seems very angry. I do not listen. Once when Wong listen, Mr. Tony kick Wong hard in backside.
Yes. Would you say there was a quarrel going on?
Plenty quarrel, then all silence. I hear door close, very loud. I wait to hear master come to bed, but no sound. Wong investigations find Mr. Tony dead.
Thomas Craig, you were the lift man on duty that night at the apartment?
Yes, I was. Came on at 8 o'clock.
What happened at 1 o'clock?
I was on the ground floor. Someone rang from the fifth. I was having a fag, so I thought maybe they could wait a minute. Then I took the lift up. As I was doing it, the bell rings again. Impatient, some people is so real impatient. And then I stops the lift. No one there. I steps out, and I sees a woman in a white evening dress and a fur coat with a hood over her head, going down the stairs. She
She sort of turned. It was that woman there, sir.
They let me see Frida after each adjournment. Below the court in a bare room. A wire screen between us. I looked at her, trying not to remember the evidence I'd heard against her.
Gilbert.
Frida, it wasn't you, was it? You weren't in his apartment.
No, Gilbert. You don't think I did it. You
No.
do. You do. I can see from your face. Oh, my God.
Court resumed.
You say you wandered the streets when you left your husband in the car, Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes, I walked.
You walked? You walked where?
Anywhere. I don't remember.
You walked to the department of the deceased.
No.
But you said you couldn't remember where you walked.
I didn't go there.
Miss Cleveland, do you love your husband?
Yes.
Did you love Tony Costa?
No.
Did you ever love him?
No.
Did he love you?
I don't know.
Did he ever in the past make love to you?
Yes, he did. But it was several years ago. There was no harm in it. It was before I met Gilbert, before I met my husband.
Yes, it was in France, wasn't it? You spent a weekend at Monte Carlo.
Yes.
And when you met again at the nightclub, he wanted to renew the affection.
I don't know.
I put it to you that he did. That he invited you to his apartment, didn't he?
I can't remember. He might have done.
And when you went there,
I didn't
he tried
go.
to make love to you again.
No.
You were afraid he'd come between you and your husband, so you seized that blood-stained figure there on the table, and you beat him up.
I didn't.
While we waited for the jury, I didn't go down to see her. I knew she'd want me to, but I couldn't. A weekend at Monte Carlo. That had hit me. With a fellow like Costa. I didn't bear thinking about it.
The prisoner will rise and face the jury. Gentlemen of the jury, how do you find the prisoner on the charge of murder? Guilty or not guilty?
We find the prisoner guilty.
Guilty? I looked at Frida standing there in the dock. And she looked out over the court, her eyes agonized.
Gilbert!
The prisoner's fainted!
I fought my way to her. My heart seemed to burst within me. She was my wife and I loved her. I couldn't believe her guilty. I couldn't!
Part 2 of the story of Frida Cleveland begins in just a moment. Meanwhile, your announcer. And now we resume the Cleveland case.
Frida was lodged in Brixton Prison. For a whole week since she was sentenced, she'd been there. And only now can I go to her.
In here, Mr. Cleveland.
Frida.
Gilbert. Oh, my dear.
They wouldn't let me see you.
I thought after the trial
I love you, Frida. I was mesmerized by what I heard in the courtroom. That vengeful prosecutor.
We've so little time. Don't let's waste it talking about what happened.
But we must. Don't you see? You didn't kill Costa. Someone else did. Some other woman was there that night, Frida. You've got to tell me all you know about him. Everything.
The police department is quite ready to give you any information on the case that you want, Mr. Cleveland.
Nothing in this apartment has been touched.
Only Costa's solicitors have been here and Wong.
Did you inquire into Costa's past life, Inspector?
We did. That's how we found out about your wife and him.
As a man of his reputation, there would be many women.
There were. Drawers of his desk are full of photographs. Look at these, all inscribed.
Darling Tony from Lee, ever yours, Gloria.
You've checked on these women?
On all who were present interests.
Oh, I see. Who's this one? There's no inscription.
On the back of the print.
Oh. Virginia Macaulay.
They're all as beautiful as she is.
Any one of these women could have been in his flat that night.
Mr. Cleveland, the jury found your wife guilty of the crime.
I don't think she did it.
But I can't tell you any more, Gil. I can't.
Was Costa married?
I don't know. Oh, I've been thinking and thinking.
Now, darling, think again about that night. Your evening bag. You did leave it at the club.
I can't remember, Gil. I must have.
If so, Costa would have found it and taken it to his apartment. Now think, Frida. Did you use the bag after we left? Your compact lipstick.
Weren't in the club very long. I had no occasion to use my lipstick. Gil, I didn't take lipstick with me. I remember. I left it at home.
Well, lipstick was in the bag. I examined it at Scotland Yard today.
It couldn't be mine, Gil.
You sure? It was dark red. I remember the name. Charmaine Cherry.
Well, I'd never use that colour. Not at night with a white frock. I'm too fair.
They said in court the lipstick was found on his desk. They assumed it belonged to you, Frida. Now, what sort of a woman would wear that colour, dressed as you were dressed?
Someone dark.
A brunette?
I think so.
This may be what we're looking for. I found myself in the Strand. As I walked, I looked at every woman's lips. Red, orange, scarlet. Perhaps among them were the lips of the woman who'd been that night in Costa's apartment. One of the many thousands who used Charmaine Cherry.
Hey, look out, Governor. Hey, what to knock him out off his ladder?
I looked up at the bill poster and skirted his ladder. On the hoarding was an advertisement. Virginia Macaulay uses Charmaine Wild Cherry lipstick. Virginia Macaulay. Where had I heard that name before?
There are many women. The drawers of his desk are full of photographs.
Virginia Macaulay. Her photograph was amongst those in Tony Costa's desk. I looked up at the billboard. Virginia Macaulay appearing now at the Avonbury Theatre.
This gentleman wants to see you, Miss Macaulay.
Oh?
Good evening. I watched your performance tonight. You're a very fine actress, Miss Macaulay.
Thank you, Mr.
In appreciation, would you accept a present from me?
A present? Oh, it's very kind of you.
I understand you do use this lipstick. It's your shade, isn't it?
Thank you. The cosmetic company supplies all I require, Mr.
Cleveland. Gilbert Cleveland.
Well, Mr. Cleveland, would you excuse me? My car's waiting.
Is Miss Macaulay in the theatre?
Sorry, sir. Miss Macaulay's off. I believe she's had a nervous breakdown. Came suddenly. She's taken a rest cruise on a liner.
Gilbert. Oh, I thought I'd never see you again.
Frida.
Egypt.
I leave tonight.
Oh, Gilbert, please don't. In 10 days, you know what they'll do in 10 days. Hang by the neck until you are dead, the judge said.
Frida.
Oh, don't leave me. For God's sake, don't leave me.
I've got to. There's just a chance, the slenderest chance, Frida, my darling, that I may have found the woman. I saw her 2 days ago, and tonight she leaves unexpectedly for Cairo.
If you shouldn't be here when...
I'll be here. I'll bring back proof. I must.
This is your table, sir.
I bribed the steward to sit me at the table with her. Her eyes were intent on the menu as I sat down.
Miss Macaulay, Mr. Cleveland.
Yet her nerves were under complete control.
Mr. Cleveland?
Yes. We've met before, Miss Macaulay.
Have we?
Yes. Charming you look. You, White, often.
Steward, it's very noisy in here. I'll have dinner in my cabin.
If she was the woman, then she was aware I knew it. The newspapers had published Frida's trial widely. Then I would keep after her, make her speak. I had to. There were only 8 days to go. I sent a photograph of Tony Costa in an envelope to her cabin. She made no sign. The next day, I bribed a steward to put something else in her cabin. A bronze statuette. Again, nothing happened. 7 days. So I searched her cabin when I knew she was on deck.
What are you doing here, Mr. Cleveland?
Well, I didn't expect you back so soon.
I see that. You've been through my trunks. Just what does this persecution mean?
You know what it means. You killed Tony Costa.
You're obviously quite crazy.
I followed you onto this ship. I'll follow you to the ends of the earth if necessary.
You rotten swine.
Why, Miss Macaulay, where's that composure?
I know you've been through a great strain. It's unhinged your mind. But if you don't stop pestering me, I'll report to you to the captain.
My wife is going to be hanged for something she didn't do. I know now that you murdered Costa, but I've no proof. But if Frida dies, then I'll kill you. Wherever you go, I'll find you and I shall kill you.
Get out of here.
We were nearing Gibraltar. Only 2 days left. I'd begun to send her envelopes with notepaper inside, on each written 5 days, 4 days, 3 days. And I haunted her. Everywhere she went on that ship, I was so close behind. And this was the night of the last day but one. I paced my cabin thinking of Frida pacing her cell.
Message for you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Be on the boat deck tonight at midnight by lifeboat 26. I can't stand any more.
Any answer, sir?
No. No answer. There was a mist on the sea. She came to me out of it. There was no one around. We might have been in a gray, shrouded world. She was wearing a white evening dress and a fur cloak with a hood.
Well, Mr. Cleveland?
You did do it, didn't you? And you were wearing the dress you're wearing now.
Yes. I killed Tony. He'd been blackmailing me. That was his racket. Women fell for him, and then they paid.
How did you do it?
When I was just starting out, another actress in a part I wanted died. Tony knew how. He could have ruined my career, killed the only thing I really loved. That's it.
So you killed him instead?
Yes. But now you threaten all that I live for. I must kill you, too. No, stand back against the rail. No one will hear a shot.
You little witch, give me that gun!
Are you ready, Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes. Is my husband here?
I'm afraid not.
He said he would... Isn't there a message?
This way, please.
Is it far?
No. Through here. Go in.
Gilbert!
Frida. Oh, my darling.
Oh, I knew you'd come.
I phoned from Gibraltar with Inspector Hanlon. You're free, my darling.
Inspector?
We've been keeping tabs on him, Mrs. Cleveland. I've never been one for circumstantial evidence, and your husband has confirmed that opinion. I had 3 of my men in that ship with him. They intervened at the right time.
Ship? I don't understand. Oh, Gilbert, your arm, you're hurt.
He's a lucky man, Mrs. Cleveland. And you're a lucky woman. Well, I'd better go and fix a few new charges. They're going to make quite a few people look silly, including me.
So, the nightmare ended. Had I doubted Frida's innocence, justice would have miscarried. And there would have been a different ending to the Cleveland case.
In a moment, I'll return with further news of these true-life dramas of the courts. But first, your announcer.
The court is adjourned until next week.
Be listening next week, same time, same station, when we present another real-life story in Dramas of the Court.